But then as soon as you have a helicopter, there's going to be something else.
Yeah, I need a yacht to land it on. I think I'm really ADHD, like really ADHD. I don't think it's like a bad thing by any means. It's like just who I am. And
Sure.
I almost think that it's like part of my superpower and how I've gotten to where I am now. They put this catheter in her neck into like a big main artery, and it's got 2 lines, an in and an out. And her blood goes out of her neck into a machine, into a centrifuge, and it spins the blood inside of it, and it separates into the 3 layers of blood. You've got your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and the platelets, like the 3 different layers. And then it skims off the middle layer, which is your stem cells. It skims it out of the middle and collects it. It's mind-blowing. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Gosh. What we've learned over time through brain scans is, so there's a small little part of our brain called the amygdala. It is responsible for fight or flight. Right, you know, the old World War II vets, Vietnam vets who didn't want to sit with their back to anybody, right? They want to sit in the corner where they can see the whole room. So that is because that part of the brain is now on the go all the time.
Hey guys, real quick, before we get into this episode, the Father's Day sale is either up or about to go up. We're probably in the middle of it right now. It starts May 26th and it's going to go until June 19th until noon. It's 20% off of all of the gear on the website except for the cruiser wagon stuff or the switchback strollers. So 20% off. Use coupon code Father's Day 20 to get 20% off your order. All right.
Hey.
How's it going, man?
Good.
Good.
Glad to be back.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years.
It has been a little while. We've got a returning guest, Philip Searcy, and I'm excited to get into this one, but we've got to start this off with a dad joke, of course. You know, a banker told me that with the right savings account, I could make money off of my money. It was interesting. That was really bad, wasn't it?
That was a big stretch.
Yes. You have to like deliver it right.
Right.
Interesting.
You got to get that little pause. Yeah.
Yes.
And what do you get when you mix a vampire and a grasshopper together?
A vampire and a grasshopper. Some sort of blood-sucking, I don't know.
Close. A little sucker this big.
Nice. That's good. How you been, man?
Hey, I'm hanging in.
Good.
We, just trying to get back into the swing of things after, with COVID and survival mode and trying to get back into thrive mode. And so the practice has been growing, and we went from when I opened having me and 2 other therapists to now it's me and 10.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
It's been good, but
that's great.
It's a lot to keep up with. The demand, COVID did bring a lot of light to mental health. So that was awesome as far as our society looking at mental health and taking it serious, but we just can't keep up with how many people are interested in getting started.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I probably should get started, but I haven't. And I think it's almost a mental game of my own where I'm like, I'm good. And I think in particular, like I have a really good mindset around a lot of things, and I'll be curious to hear your take on this. And because I don't feel bad about anything. I'm actually become more and more self-aware through the situation with Kendall and cancer and having a lot of time to reflect and what's important, what's not important, being away from the business for long periods of time. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I've had lots of time to reflect and do a lot of self-awareness. And I think we'll probably get into some of that as well. And the situation and the trauma around Kendall and how that's affected our family and me personally, potentially. But generally speaking, like my mental health state is usually pretty good. Like I might have some stress around some things that it's like, that's pretty normal where it's just like, all right, I got deadlines, I got this. And it's like managing and balancing and doing those sort of things. But
now, how do you define good?
Well, that's a good question. If a good question is good, what is good, right? Now,
right, yeah.
I don't know. I just, I generally speaking, like really positive person. Like I look at the glass is half full, I don't look at negative. I don't have a lot of negativity. I don't think in negative ways. I might have a moment, of course, like most everyone does. But I'm generally like more positive or spikes of positivity. And where I think I've learned recently, like a lot of people have spikes of negativity and they just get real angry and frustrated. And I'm pretty even keeled or positive, generally speaking.
Okay.
And maybe some of that's denial. Or it's a coping mechanism.
Sure. And I think as a man, we are much more equipped at compartmentalizing. There was even a book written a long time ago. I think the title was Men Are Waffles, Women Are Spaghetti. Right? You think of a waffle, it's all these nice little compartments. And,
structured.
Yeah. And we can say this, I'm with my work friends, I'm with my wife, I'm with my kids. And, take these little moments where we are compartmentalizing, and then, spaghetti, everything touches somewhere. Right?
That's interesting. Is that, and that's like pretty...
No, it's a stereotypical,
okay.
Genetic man versus woman, but personality plays a lot into that. There's a lot more, men who can be more emotional, can be more in tune and empathetic. But stereotypically speaking, I think men have a little bit of better ability for that coping of compartmentalizing. Now, the issue is this compartmentalizing as a strategy, or is it compartmentalizing as avoidance?
Interesting.
So what would you look at the difference?
Personally, I think it's more of I don't know if it's strategy. I've never thought about it, obviously, in that capacity. I think it's just like the way I'm wired, where it's like, this is this. And a lot of times it's just matter of fact. And I, don't let too many things bleed over, especially because I've got so many things going on in different facets of life that, like, if I don't compartmentalize them and say, like, this is dedicated time and brain power for this one thing, and I start to do too much multitasking, and then the spaghetti's touching, and then things are a mess, and it doesn't work for me. So I've had to learn over the years to compartmentalize it, I think, or to like be very deliberate about where I'm focusing my thoughts on one thing or the another. And a lot of times I'm switching gears many times throughout the day, where it's like, okay, some creative and this is the very difficult thing for anybody to do, but like, here's a creative project, and now I'm going to go into a meeting about finance and spreadsheets and taxes, and then I got to go back to this creative project, and it's like, you're completely taken out of that flow. And then in the middle of it, my wife's called me, and Kendall's got to go back to the hospital, and it's like, holy smokes. But I do a good job of balancing it, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the fact that you can articulate it that way means that you're doing it with a purpose. Now, I wonder, as a father of a child with cancer, right? Sometimes you do have to wear that hat of being the positive one.
Yeah,
no matter 100%. No matter how you're feeling inside.
And I have plenty of moments, for sure. Don't get me wrong.
Great.
I'm very emotional at times, but I do my best to do it on my own time, or maybe I have a moment, and I don't want Kendall to see me upset and have her think that I'm scared for her or fear for her or make her upset about something. She's seen me cry, and she knows that it's usually those are usually happy tear times, right? Where like, we got great news. She's done awesome. I'm super proud of her. Her sister's been a rock star. Cameron, our oldest, has been incredible through this whole process. And it made me super emotional in the beginning, because I was like, man, like, I just don't want her to have to grow up too quickly. I still want her to be a kid. She's like the glue that was holding everything together at home when me and Brandy were at the hospital, and she was taking care of the dog and taking care of the baby. And I mean, my mom was there, obviously, as an adult, but Cameron was awesome. And it just made me like, one, super proud of her. So I was emotional about that. But then two, just like, I just want you to still be able to be a kid for the next few years and not have to grow up too fast yet. And that was another component. I was like,
because what, she's 12 now?
She's 12 in July. So almost 12.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's an age where there's the transition.
There's a lot of her own life transitioning happening right there.
Right, and she's finding herself. She's understanding her body, understanding social, right? Because she's in this transition period of, as kids, they only want attention from their parents, right? As a kid, it's like the two people in your life that matter the most are your parents. That's where you want your attention, and then you transition to adolescence, where social acceptance and peer acceptance matters way more than anything else. And that's why middle school is such a rough time, because everybody's the most immature they're ever going to be. And that's when we want everybody to like us the most.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, middle school, thankfully, we've had a pretty good experience in middle school. There's been a few moments here and there, which you would expect from, anybody at that age in middle school. But Cameron's such a good, cool kid. She's beautiful. Like she just doesn't, I don't think she's going to have a lot of problems. You know, of course there's moments, you know, but generally speaking, it's been a really good experience. She's at a great school with great staff and great principal and all that. So that really helps.
Yeah. My daughter's about to finish 7th grade. So,
you know.
Yeah. And I, you know, as a therapist, I work with teenagers, and so middle school, high school, and I've been petrified of her going into middle school because I hear all the worst stories, and it's like, it doesn't matter if it's this Christian school or this private school or this public school, they're going to be introduced to the same kind of things. And so luckily she's found a really good group of friends. She's playing sports. So that's
the friend group matters a lot, I'm sure. In my mind, it does. I mean, you might tell me different, but
no, it does. I mean, as a therapist, the things that I see is if they're not a part of a club, a sport, if they don't associate with the nerds or the popular kids or the whatever, it doesn't matter really what the group and the clique is. It's if they don't have some group that they connect with, and they're more at risk of getting caught up into drugs, alcohol, sex, and partying, whatever that might be. And so it's great that they have a group of friends who they can associate with, no matter what it is that they're associating in that moment.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that as a family, you guys have talked about everything, that you're talking, you know, with Cameron about how she feels, how she's handling things?
Yeah. Yeah. We've tried to do that. And we've opened the door for conversation many times, and it's not like, and we've had conversations about it, and it's like, she understands what's going on. She's got good spirits about it. You know, thankfully we've got a, you know, very good outcome, you know, outlook of all this stuff too. Right. So it's not, early on it was much scarier, but now we're like 6 months into this, we kind of have a pretty good idea of how things are going to go, we hope. Right. So it's much more positive conversations, and now it's just a lot of like spending time in hospitals and just going through the motions at this point. But I think we have all the information. So, but I mean, we've talked about it individually with the kids, you know, on a sort of one-on-one basis, and let them ask questions and told them as much as we think they need to know. You know, I think there's some power in not knowing quite as much at that age, you know, which I think has been the big strength for Kendall in particular, where if she knew too much going into it, I think her mindset would be different about it. She might be more scared. She might be more like right now, she couldn't be more positive and less caring about. She's like, yep, let's go. Let's do it. Yeah. And she's not, well, what's going to happen? How is this going to, like, the biggest thing is, you know, if she has to have a shot or a needle or something, like, she's terrified of that. Right. But she's gotten so used to it now that even that, now it's a game for her. She's like, ooh, what am I going to wear to the hospital? Because she is like Little Miss Fashion. And every time she goes, she is a completely different look. And all the nurses, all the doctors can't wait to see what Kendall's going to be wearing. So she's awesome. Like the talk of the hospital every time. And she gets all the dog visitors. But she's involved in all the conversations at the hospital with all the doctors. She hears it. Sometimes she pays attention. Sometimes she doesn't want to pay attention. And then where it's like, do you understand what's going on? Yep. Do you have any questions? Nope. You know, and then the doctor leaves the room and it's like, hey, do you really understand? Like, do you want to know anything else? Do you need to, like, do you understand this? Or do you have questions about that? And she's like, no, I heard him say this and I heard him say that. It's like, okay, so you were listening. Right. Is it while you were watching your iPad or doing whatever?
Always taking in information.
Oh, dude, I mean, all kids are sponges. I mean, they absorb it passively. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they could be watching YouTube.
Or scary as a parent.
It is. You think like, oh, they're not paying attention. I can talk openly about something, but it's like, no. They're listening. Yep. And they will either repeat what you're saying, which sometimes you don't want repeated outside the house or whatever the case might be, you know.
Call you out in the awkward moments when your friends are over and like, didn't you say this, Daddy? I'm like, nope.
I thought you didn't hear me say that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I think ultimately when someone is going through something like this as a family, and a lot of the research shows that the child who actually has the diagnosis doesn't tend to have as much risk of, you know, a PTSD kind of diagnosis. And the reason a lot of the times for that is that becomes their norm. right? They don't have enough life experience to understand all the different paths that could have happened. And now she's become the popular one and she gets the attention. And so it's likely she's going to look back on it as an adult and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I went through that. However, her child brain is, there's a piece of it that's like, okay, I'm going to the hospital again. I'm going to get to pet this dog. I'm going to get to talk to this doctor. I'm going to get a lot of attention from people looking at my outfit. And, so she's still getting to experience life the same as she would otherwise. Now, the family, the parents especially, it can become a lot more of a risk, right? Of holding on to it, of being something that follows you longer than you want it to. Now, doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be a PTSD diagnosis, right? Because that's, 6 months past the trauma per se, and you're still having these vivid symptoms. However, it can be something that haunts you in your brain. And for a parent, it's probably the thing that you never want to happen, right? And because there's so much uncertainty, and anxiety is fear of the unknown. And that uncertainty can churn in our heads and we can drive ourselves crazy. So I think that you all have done, as far as what I've been able to see on, social media and things of that sort, I think you've done an excellent job because you're trying to utilize this experience to help others.
Yeah.
Right. And finding meaning in things that we go through, even things that are traumatic, even things that are heavy and scary, finding meaning in them and being able to help someone else makes it in a way worth it.
Yeah. That was a big part of this in the beginning was, initially Brandy in particular was like, hey, don't put anything on. So I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to share it and all this stuff. And I was like, fair enough. I really wanted to. I felt like it was important. There's a lot of people that care about our family. One, like personally, that was like, okay, like I think everyone kind of needs to know what's going on.
Sure.
One, but then two, I was like on a bigger scale, Kendall is the whole reason Tactical Baby Gear exists. She's the reason this company exists. And I was like, it would be a disservice for us to not share this experience and this journey and what we're going through, that if it can help the people, someone behind us that's going to either help them like realize their kid has cancer by understanding how we found it or whatever. Or if you're going through it, like, can we share the experience so they know what to expect? Or can we be positive and let that lead by example sort of a thing for other people behind us, where it's like, it's not a pity party at our house. It is not doom and gloom. We stay extremely positive about it. Brandy and I obviously have conversations that are, I don't even want to say less positive. It's just like, here's the reality of the situation. Now what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And then it's just like positive from there. We're not doom and gloom whatsoever, which I think has really helped. And we've gotten a lot of, and it's been, I don't want to say it's almost been a saving grace, where it's like the more we put out there, the more we get back. Like our community at Tactical Baby Gear, thankfully, is large. So it's when we put it out there and shared it, it was like, oh, my kid had the same cancer, or we just went through this and we saw Dr. So-and-so, and that guy happens to be like the world leader in neuroblastoma. So then like an hour later, I'm on the phone with that guy, the world lead, and he's saying this and da-da-da-da-da. So then you start to go down a rabbit hole of a completely different way of thinking about this cancer than a lot of other hospitals, which then makes you research it more. And then you find out about this thing. And then, so it's like, it's been a blessing. And there's been a lot of people who have really done a lot of great things for us because we put it out there. And the more we put it out there, the more we get back. And Kendall, people have done great fundraisers and stuff for her, which isn't money that we need as a family to get through this, thankfully, but it's money that we're putting aside for her to be able to use later in life, because like, she's not going to be able, they say, won't be able to get pregnant and have kids, so there might be, IVF or this or that, whatever she might need to do in the future to take care of herself, or whatever medical, this will be a lifelong thing for her. This is not going away when it's over. It's not over. This will be the rest of her life. She will have to be concerned about it in some capacity, because she's lost a kidney and she's lost, other organs and stuff there. It's like are affected by it. So she'll just constantly be thinking about it.
The ripple effects are going to be felt for a long time.
For a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's less of an effect when she's 30, that it's like, yeah, I only have one kidney and just to make sure I stay hydrated. And that's the, but it's something she will always have to think about. Sure. And then again, with having kids, like they're saying, because she'll have radiation to her abdomen, that's going to affect fertility and, her ability to get pregnant. So, those are real concerns. So anyways, funds like that, that people are doing fundraisers and donating money and doing things that we have never asked for, but like we're just putting it aside for her to be able to use later in life. So, but those things wouldn't be happening if we didn't put it out there. So I believe, I'm a big believer in like putting things out there and you'll get it back. It's like karma, I guess, right?
Yeah. And it's vulnerability, right? And are you familiar with Brene Brown?
No.
Oh my gosh. Look her up. Everybody, Brene Brown. She got her kind of name to fame with a TED Talk a long time ago, but she's a clinical social worker like myself, but she went in the route of research. And her research was really human connection. And it's a really hard type of research because you're not getting just yes and no answers from people. It's like you're getting detailed things. So to kind of go that route with research
track
is tough.
That data, yeah.
But the data, all of it, showed that we can never have the connection, the human connection that we want, desire, and need without vulnerability. Now, our society shows that vulnerability is a weakness. But what she determined is that you can never have a moment that is vulnerable that does not take strength, right? A soldier running into battle, that's a vulnerable thing. Because vulnerability means uncertainty. So if you're going into something with certainty, then that doesn't take a lot of strength, right? If you're going to start a business.
Yeah, I know the outcome of this. There's no risk. There's
exactly. Right. But when there's risk and there's unknowns of how is somebody going to respond to this information? How is this business going to do? How is this, interview that I'm about to go into going to be, right? And that uncertainty takes a lot of strength because we are pushing ourselves to be vulnerable in a time where we don't know how it's going to be. And so you putting all this out there took a lot of strength because you had to be vulnerable. You had to talk about crying, right? Your wife, I remember, posted a picture of you, I think, Kendall, and I remember she had a very beautiful, eloquent, kind of post about it. But I think it was a few days later or something.
I came back with a different story. Yeah, you
came back with a different story because that's what social media does, right? Is it shows this without context. It shows this like kind of beautiful picture, but you were like, no, this is it. This is how I've been.
Yeah, she said something. I'm trying to recall, and I hope I don't screw it up, but it was a picture of me with Kendall in the hospital, and I don't remember. I was doing something with her, and she's like, "Oh, we're so lucky to have." Kendall's got such a good dad or something like that. It was like, okay, that's really nice.
Yep.
I saw that picture and it was like painful because I knew that the emotion and what that photo represented to me, which was having to tell Kendall that, she's going to lose her hair and, what all this cancer is and the fear and the uncertainty and all that kind of stuff. And it was for me, not like we're so lucky, dad's so strong and so nice, which I appreciate.
Sure.
But that was more of a painful photo for me, which was interesting.
Yeah. But for you to put that out there and to be vulnerable, because you could have just taken that. Right?
Oh yeah.
I'm
awesome.
Right,
look how good I'm great, right?
Look at me. I told you guys, I told you I'm a good dad, right? That's why I started this business. I'm a good dad, right? but you didn't. You took that opportunity to be vulnerable. And I think you're right. Like what you put out there in terms of vulnerability is what you're going to get back. And so once you're vulnerable, now other people are like, hey, me too. Like I'm struggling too, right? And that's what I wish would happen a lot more in our mental health world is that everybody's holding it in.
Well, and that's the same thing with social media, right? Everything's a highlight reel. It's since you only post the best stuff. And I think that plays into the same thing of like, there's a lot of the vulnerability thing too. Because we're so much in social media and because I spend a lot of time and effort putting things out there, for various reasons, whether it's because I want to share the story or there's sort of there's a capacity of some of the things we do on different channels are for business success, but I spend a lot of time and effort and energy and thought and strategy into a lot of the different things we do. But I've realized, in my research and data tracking, it's like the more, going back to vulnerability, it's like the more authentic you can be, which then I think translates into that vulnerability and showing that everything's not perfect.
Right.
Kids are screaming in my house. Kids are crying in my house. Things are going wrong. Like, it's not this beautiful, perfect highlight reel. Like, that starts to get people, I think, now are understanding that content like that is manufactured. I'm only going to show you the good stuff. And I think as you become more vulnerable and show all of it, people are more interested in that. And it's more authentic. And man, what a genuine guy. What a genuine family. Like, they're not full of it, trying to pump a bunch of smoke and make it look like it's all rainbows and unicorns, right?
Yeah.
So there's that.
But there's always going to be the haters that are like, oh, he's just using his daughter's stuff to get, views or whatever.
I haven't had a single one of those.
Awesome.
And I think it's because of the vulnerability and the, like, I don't have to share this stuff. Like, I don't know that I also, even if I had that comment like that, I don't think I'd put much weight on it.
Right. Good.
Because it's like, man, how miserable does that person and how upset is that person to make a comment like that? Right. So it's all been positive, which is incredible for the internet.
Yes, which is very unheard of. It is not the norm.
Yeah, and I'm selective about where I share certain pieces of it too. Like, we've got a family vlog, the Brodie Bunch. I don't know if you've seen that, right? But it's
genius. I love it.
It's fun, and it's just like, we initially started it because we do a lot of stuff as a family, and we do a lot of fun stuff, and we did this big RV trip, and I was like, let me just document and place this thing in its own category. So that's this YouTube channel, the Brodie Bunch. If you guys want to check it out, it's fun, it's cool. It's turned into a lot of Kendall stuff, but now that we're through a lot of it, it's back to boating and RVs and adventure and fun and whatever. And then there's like, I cherry pick more inspirational pieces that I want to share, or like major updates that I want to share to Tactical Baby Gear channels, because it hits a broad, more mass thing where it's like, I want people to see this because it's inspiring or it's educational. Like, they need to know this information or whatever the thing might be. Because what I didn't want to happen, I didn't want Tactical Baby Gear channels to turn into like a cancer page. Like, every post is about this kid. Like, that's, I was like, that needs to,
little separation of church and state.
You got it. You got it.
And so the Brodie Bunch gives you that.
It gives us a place to make those. If you want to follow Kendall's story, that's where you can do it. Otherwise, I'll major updates, stuff that I feel is important or valuable information or education for other families. We'll go to Tactical Baby Gear as well. Right. But
I think it was a Tactical Baby Gear episode that you talked through the whole experience, right?
On the podcast, up to that point.
Right. Up to that point, right?
Yeah, which has been, a lot has happened since then. And I could fill in some of those blanks now if we want to go through it.
But I do think that was a beautiful thing for you. And it's probably why at the beginning of this, you were able to say, hey, I'm in a good mental headspace. And a lot of that is because you allowed yourself to talk through it in detail. Talk about how you feel, talk about the parts that were scary, talk about your emotions. And that is one of the most freeing things for a human being. And that's why therapy, right? Talk therapy is so therapeutic, because you're actually
get it
saying,
off your shoulders,
you're saying the things that bounce around in your head all the time. But once you hear your own words through your own ears, it registers different. And so it takes away some of the power. And so you did that on a grand scale that not a lot of people get to do. I mean, it would have been, if you came into my office and were sharing it to me, it would still be helpful. It'd still be therapeutic, but to say it in a way where hundreds, thousands of people are seeing it, can see it, and still being vulnerable, I think that's why you have the ability to sit here and say, I'm good. I'm good.
I wonder if that's true in the rest of my life, because I share so much, and I like a lot of it. For me, I have so many thoughts running through my head of things I don't want to forget. So sometimes it's nice to document it on a camera or whatever. And it's like, now I don't have to worry about forgetting it. It's there. And I can let that thought go.
Right.
It's almost like making notes. I'm a video communicator, which is one of the things I've learned about myself a little while back, where it's like, hey, can you write a blog? No, I can't write a freaking, I can hardly write a text message. Are you kidding me? Like,
but just let me ramble on, and that'll be good.
Thank God for emojis,
right?
You know, or I'd be screwed,
right? And GIFs.
But I just don't communicate well through written stuff, sure. And I don't read well. I don't read good. I hate reading. Reading comprehension. I could read a paragraph and then not tell you what I just read. Like, I'm terrible. I'm realizing now through more and more people talking about it too, that I'm like, I think I'm really ADHD, like really ADHD.
Last year, I hired an educational therapist. So she specializes in executive functioning, which is all that frontal part of the brain that's goal setting, self-discipline, organization, time management, and ADHD impacts that part of the brain the most. Mm-hmm. And so because I hired her, I started to research a lot more, and I started to find myself in all of this. I'm like, that's me. That's me.
I think it's a lot of people, like more so than are diagnosed,
right?
But I don't think it's like a bad thing by any means. It's like just who I am, and sure. I almost think that it's like part of my superpower and how I've gotten to where I am now, because I like hyper focus on things that matter to me, mm-hmm. and nothing. If it doesn't matter, it'll get pushed off. It'll whatever. If there isn't a even if there's if the deadline is 30 days from now, I'm not going to do it till like day 29.
Right.
Like
now,
it's not important to me until then.
And that's a very common thing with ADHD, because the brain operates really well under pressure. And so, it's this attention deficit disorder, but it's really, and I can't remember his name, but he was talking about it being explained better as a intention deficit disorder, right? We have this intention, but we're not necessarily accomplishing all the things that we have intention to do. But deadlines and living under this status of crisis and pressure, right? And timelines. I thrive right there. Same.
I'm in the zone.
It is when I can do my best work.
Actually goes to, did you see the video I put about almost getting shot in the parking garage?
I saw the title of it, but I did not.
It's bananas. I won't go into detail, but basically I was in the parking garage. A couple of guys started shooting at each other. I was like 20 yards from it. It was like this big thing. And I was like, that's where I thrive, in pressure, being able to think critically and make decisions. And I was like, okay, do I do this? Do I do this? No, there's two ladies, middle-aged women, 50, 60 years old. I need to get them out of this situation. This lady got hit in the leg with shrapnel. It was like the whole thing. And, but I kind of like realized again then, I'm like, man, I do really good under pressure. And that's a totally different type of pressure. And I've been through some like firearms training and stuff that like helped with that type of a pressure. It's a but deadline pressure is big for me, where it's like, it's not important to me until it's due tomorrow. Yeah. And then I'm going to crank on it and it's going to get done. It's going to be awesome. It's like, and then I'm like hyper, and it's like tunnel vision. You're like, nope, just this.
Yep. And that's a part of ADHD, which is that hyper focus. Mm-hmm. And so you can really get hyper focused into one thing, and then everybody's looking at you like, what do you mean you're ADHD? You just focused for got all 6 this stuff hours, done. Right? And it's like, yeah, but I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I didn't, Yeah. And so, it's like my wife always tells me, she's like, you can be super patient with big, important things. But then if it's like clothes hangers getting stuck together, you're like, lose it, And so it's that, getting shot at, seeing a whole thing, then you're like in the zone, right? But then, clothes hangers makes you want to just lose punch a hole in the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that a few times.
But it's interesting you brought that up, because because I started to look into that, I started to see myself. And so I had to fight my own, shame. And I actually went and got psychological testing done.
Interesting.
And came back. I really associated all of my ADHD stuff with anxiety. I just said, okay, this is anxiety. This is anxiety. But come to find out, I was just anxious about all the things that I wasn't getting accomplished.
That's me all day. And I'll get to breaking points where that those things that you're not getting accomplished that start to build up and they build up and they build up, and it turns into like this anxiety, and it's like a panic attack. And then I'll get to the point where like I can't breathe. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and then it's like, whatever I'm doing right now, everything has to stop, and I've got to go check some stuff off this list. I just did a project this weekend that's been sitting for maybe 3 years that I'm like, every time I walk by, I see this thing and I'm like, I got to finish that. I got to finish that. I got to do that. And I had this rare opportunity Sunday. It was like the girls were all doing their things and they had friends over and blah, blah, blah. It's raining. I'm like, I'm going to sneak away to the shop. I'm going to go do this one thing that's been hanging over my head for years. And I did. It was great.
Yeah. It took you 3 years.
It took me 3 years to work on it for 2 hours. That was it. 2 hours.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a length of time thing that something's taking. I mean,
it's it's a level of importance kind of thing where it's like, for me, something else always becomes more important.
Right.
The
priority.
Like, it's a priority thing. And it's like, it's not even, I don't think it's even procrastination. It's just that like something else becomes more important and now you have to deal with this because it's due tomorrow.
Right.
And you didn't manage your time well.
This is the most important thing right now.
So like this thing's getting pushed and then you're going to get, and then something else and then it gets pushed again. And then because it's just not that important that it got done. It could have never gotten done and nothing in the world would have changed. Yeah. Doesn't matter. But it's part of the problem is because I owed it to somebody.
Yeah.
External accountability for me is huge too. And I'm sure that's part of ADHD where it's like, you said something initially when you were talking about ADHD and it was, maybe it was something about self, whatever, but external accountability, like if I have to do it for me, I could push it off forever and I don't really care. Like I don't respect myself enough to make things a priority, but if it's for someone else, it's getting done and I'm not going to let that person down. And everyone's like, man, you get so much done. It's like, it's like especially same thing,
it's a gift.
I think it's a part of the superpower, but it's also like, I have to almost have people babysitting me in some capacity that I have to be accountable to. Right. So like when I wanted to go to the gym and work out, for me to go to the gym and work out for me ain't going to happen. I don't like it. I don't want to be there. I got more important things to do than go to the gym for me.
Right.
But I hire a personal trainer and like, oh shoot, John's going to be waiting for me. I got to be there. Smart. I don't want to let him down.
Smart.
Hey, I hired a personal assistant, Jade. Make sure that I am at this meeting, schedule this stuff for me so that I'm accountable to a thing on the calendar and I won't screw it up. Yep. But if it's like open-ended, unless it's like a passion project and something I want to do, like I'm going to come in Saturday and build this Land Cruiser or whatever, like I'm doing it because it's a hobby. It's like my hyper focus, like, and then I obsess over it until it's done. Right. And get out of the way because it's happening. Yeah. And Brandy knows that too. And we've never really labeled it as, I've never had this conversation with her because it's something I've realized slowly over the last few weeks as I've seen people on YouTube talking about it more and more, which is great. I think bringing awareness, because so many people look at that, they're like, oh my God, I'm ADHD. And they're like, in a shell, don't tell anybody, don't anybody know, this is my thing, blah, blah, blah. And more people are starting to talk about it. And then talking about some of the advantage. I mean, there's a huge advantage to some of that.
Sure.
So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's great. Knowledge is power. Like the more you know about yourself, the more you can leverage it or do other things about it. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, there's certain things that take me out of those modes again, where like we were talking about before, I'm having to switch gears many, many times throughout the day. Yep. And it takes me away from that hyper focus. Yep. Where it's like, all right, how do I get somebody to deal with these things so I don't have to, so I can stay in this gear or this mindset or whatever you want to call it. Right. And so it's like, all right, the more I know about myself, the more I can leverage the thing I'm good at, get someone else to handle the other stuff that keeps me doing what I'm good at. Right. And because you can't, the more you try to fight it and combat it and try to overcome something, like that's it. You're wired that way. Right. And like, I guess you could medicate for it, but I don't want to say I'm not into that because I don't really know the full extent of what all that means. Sure. But like for me, I wouldn't want to change anything about the way I am. I'd rather lean into it somehow.
I think that's what people tend to get scared of with mental health in general is, okay, if I'm going to go see a therapist, does that mean I got to get on an antidepressant? Do I need to start taking Adderall because have ADHD now, right? Medication is there. It is a tool. It is not the only tool. Mm-hmm. All the things that you're talking about, like that switching gears from one task to another, that's a very executive functioning piece, right? And so you have just over time naturally figured out strategies that work better for you, right? Now, not everybody has that luxury. Mm-hmm. And so if someone does not understand and they keep being told that they're lazy, right? They keep being told that they're not getting themselves prepared, that they're late for everything. So they just don't care. It's not a caring thing. It's the way their brain is processing is just not the same as a neurotypical brain. And so that is, I think, finding out whether or not that is an actual diagnosis for me allowed me to step away from shame.
Mm-hmm.
And, the difference between guilt and shame, right, is guilt is responsibility. I'm responsible for that. I did that, right? Shame is when we internalize that and we say, what I'm responsible for says something about who I am, right? So if I'm running late for work, hop in my truck, back up and knock over my neighbor's mailbox, I'm guilty. I did it. I'm responsible. I was the one driving. I wish that didn't even happen. Now, shame would be if I started the internal dialogue of, I'm so stupid.
Yeah, I can't believe I did that.
I'm a horrible driver. They deserve to hate me. I'm not even a good neighbor because I did that. So shame is really at the core of every single human being. And I think we are fearful of having more evidence to shame ourselves because we live with every single thing that we've ever done, every mistake we've made, every person we've ever hurt, all the demons in our closets that nobody knows of, all the things people have said to us that have hurt us. And unless we give ourselves patience and grace and say that we are strong because we've overcome those things instead of just living in that past, then we're going to carry that shame. And so for me, there was a lot of shame in, why can't I just get this stuff done? Like I've got the intention to do it, but sometimes I feel paralyzed at a project that's been sitting in my back of my mind for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got this teen program that I've been wanting to do for years, and I'm just like, I've got 80% of the stuff done. Why can't I just spend that last 2 hours just knocking this out? And so finding that diagnosis for me, even though, medication could be an option, it was, all right, I need to stop treating this as anxiety, and I need to start thinking of strategies to set myself up for success, right? So if it's a personal assistant, even Dr. Powell, who I've got, that educational therapist, she turned me on to changing my Apple Watch, instead of it just being the digital numbers like 631, to change it to the analog, I guess that's called, right? Where your brain is going to process different, seeing that minute hand go through time versus just numbers. It doesn't register length of time. So actually seeing the minute hand is like, whoa, that was a 30-minute period that I just got lost in.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
So that's the kind of stuff that...
The psychology of the watch face. That's so crazy.
And there are all those little things, like whether it's time management, organization. So it's...
Is organization... like in the world of ADHD, is organization like something that is, you're very organized or you're unorganized?
I think,
do you know?
If we were going to say stereotypically, I would say most ADHD people are not going to be very organized. However, organization is this thing that's going to help them thrive, right? Because when you don't have to wonder where things are, right? You just go into your pantry and you know that those chips or snacks are there. You know where your underwear drawer is. You know that you've put this baseball at this spot in the garage because that's where all the stuff goes.
See, I'm obsessed with organization.
Great.
Like everything's got to have its home. Like everything, partially because I have so much stuff, which is another like character trait of mine, which is like, I'm like a preparedness sort of freak. And it's not like doomsday prepper, zombie preparedness. It's more of like, I have a lot of stuff. I want to be self-sufficient. So I need these set of tools to take care of this thing that I bought. And this thing needs its own things to be taken care of. So it's like the more stuff I accumulate, then it's like, okay, now I need a place to put these cars that I bought. Right. And I need to have tools to fix these cars that I bought. And the RV needs its own set of tools. So we're on the road, we can take care of ourselves. And it's like a self-reliance, preparedness sort of thing. So like I like stuff. I like toys. I like cars and boats and RVs. And I like stuff. It's fun. I like to get out and do stuff. I like to have experiences, but then I need to be like self-reliant within those experiences. So I accumulate more stuff. And so now it's like, I have so much stuff that everything needs a home. Everything needs to have its place. I don't want to be looking for it because I don't like to waste time.
Right.
I like to be very efficient because I try to do a lot of things. I'm very like, part of me, I think out of necessity has to multitask. Although I've realized that like I need to reduce the amount of multitasking that I'm doing as much as I can, because I'm like only doing like 50% effort on any of them rather than even 80% effort on any of them, which these days I'm like, if I can get 80% on something, like I'm winning.
You're happy.
Because 100%, there's like this perfectionist side of me where like everything's got to be, and I've learned to let go of that. I'm like 80% and done is better than 100% and never, like, just keep going. Yeah. There's a volume game that I'm playing right now with a lot of things, in particular creating content, where it's like, yeah, I could tweak that. No one's going to care. No one's going to notice. It's not going to matter. It's done. Send it next.
And I think you've learned that because of this.
I think it's repetition
that you're in, right? And you've had to let go of the small things, right? But for ADHD, there's a lot of people who, what we call masking, and perfectionism is one of those, right? We want to appear that we've got everything together and that we're getting everything done at 100%. But learning to let go and not sweat the small stuff is not as easy as you're talking about. But yeah, you've prioritized organization because you know that otherwise you would be so upset spending so much time trying to find things. So you've found natural ways on your own outside of therapy to
I'm a genius.
Manage.
I'm good, right? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Let's say it. You heard it here, right? So it's really cool that you have kind of found these things for yourself. Not everybody is willing to put in that kind of effort to naturally find the skills and the strategies. Some people don't have, parents growing up that maybe supported it, right? Maybe they were shamed a lot and talked as that they were lazy or that they didn't care, or they had no motivation. But it's really hard to get into structure, right? To fit into a school system, to have a chore task that you're going to do at home as a kid, whatever that might be. So it's finding out how to set yourself up for steps to get you there. Now, I heard this therapist once explaining, like, when the parents would come into the room, the first thing he would say is, okay, hey, do a backflip into the office. And the parents are like, well, I can't do that. And he's like, you heard my request. Do a backflip into my office. And they're just like, I can't do that. And he's like, okay, so let's start with the front roll. Right, front roll into the office. And he sets the tone for talking to the parents that are upset that their kid's not doing X, Y, and Z, that they're setting this expectation and my kid's just not doing it. And he's like, right.
Same thing.
Set them up. Give them the steps. Like, even if it seems very, elementary in terms of the steps, that for you think this 12-year-old should be able to do X, Y, and Z. However, if they're struggling with ADHD, their brain is just not going to process exactly the way that parents might. So it becomes difficult if you grow up in an environment that's invalidating, right? That you feel something bad or something is wrong with you, that you're broken because of what you've been experiencing and what you're dealing with, that nobody understands. And now our society is getting better at understanding that. Now we have content creators who are saying, I'm ADHD, right? Like, let's talk about this, and here's some of the things that I deal with. And it breaks down some of the, stereotypes about it. But yes, please don't think if you go get diagnosed that you have to be in therapy or you have to take medication. If you're in school, it can give you a lot of accommodations in terms of, do you need more time with tests, right? Do you need to sit in a different room so that you're not distracted by external things? But once you're an adult, it's more really, I think, so you can set up appropriate strategies for yourself and, it's set your future self up for success.
What does Adderall do to help somebody with ADHD? Like, how does it affect the brain, or how does it affect your mental state?
It's a stimulant. So it's going to give you a lot more motivation. Right? It's going to give you a push. And so sometimes with ADHDs, there's this threshold, right? For some, it may take 5 minutes to pass through that threshold. Some, it may take 3 years on a project to push through that threshold. But the stimulant is really just going to give you that oomph to push through and not procrastinate as often, not get overwhelmed by the kind of racing thoughts of everything that you need to do or should do or have intention to do. And Adderall is just one. I mean, there's Vyvanse, there's Focalin.
They all sort of do that same sort of thing.
There are the big three.
All of that sounds terrifying to me because I'm super motivated already and I get a lot done. There's like these random projects because I'm not accountable to anybody or anything for getting it done.
Right.
Those are the ones that get pushed off.
Sure.
But like people would want to kill me if I took Adderall. I'd be like, let's do everything.
Right.
And they'd be like, okay, bro, no thanks. I'm out, So
I'll give an example.
terrifying.
So I had a client once who talked a lot about what you were saying earlier with reading, right? You could read a whole page and then you get done and you're like,
couldn't tell you what I just read. Yeah. Reading comprehension out the door.
So then you go back and read it again, same thing, right? And again and again. And even if you stop and focus all of your attention on that page and you read it, then you're just mentally exhausted.
Yep.
Because you actually retained it.
And unless it's something you have interest in.
Right.
If I'm reading something very technical about a car thing or a camera thing or this or that, and I'm like, I'm interested in it, but it's like, hey, I need you to read this book and I want a book report at the end of it in 3rd grade or 6th grade, whatever.
Where are the cliff notes? Right.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
Impossible. Couldn't do it.
And for me, that was the same with reading, but I had this client that explained how he had that same experience. So it's a very common thing. And the first time he took Adderall, he read and he was amazed that he actually enjoyed reading, that he could retain the information, that he could sit and focus on something that wasn't just that hyper focus because I'm interested in it thing. And so that's where medication can really help. Now, there are different types of medications out there that are more in the blood pressure range or antihistamine kind of things that can give some support to, the ADHD symptoms. But again, it's not a make it or break it. If you don't take Adderall, then you're doomed.
Right.
That's why I hired Dr. Christine Powell, who is that educational therapist, and everything that she does is really, she doesn't push away medication, but she says, hey, this is an alternative to medication for ADHD treatment. And if the parents can understand and the child or the individual can understand, and they can see that here are the different executive functioning pieces, you're really good at these. However, these are the ones that are a little bit more of a limitation for you. And here's some strategies, right? Like the watch thing or organization or strategies for being more motivated, right? So it's trying to figure out with each person what's going to work the best.
Do you think that the rise of social media has created more of this?
Oh, absolutely.
With like short attention spans and that sort of thing.
What's
where
a TikTok video? What is 6 seconds?
Stuff just like flowing into your face all day. Like there was a side of me who sort of chalked it up to some of that stuff. And I think the reading thing, trying to think about this, and it's like we strategize a lot in our stuff that we do business wise to be very short, very precise, very like emails. It's like, if we can't say it in like 5 words, don't buy, like no one's going to read this paragraph, myself included. Email stresses me out because it's just too much reading and I don't care. Like I get an email, it's like 3 paragraphs from some agency who's trying to pitch me. I'm like, delete.
Three sentences in,
done.
Over it.
Nope.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, I also already know what the rest of it's going to say and they just want to, like, they want your business and they're whatever. But
yeah, we need things to catch our attention really quickly. And it's why you'll even see people watch a movie, and as they're watching a movie, they're still scrolling because, we just are so accustomed to having instant gratification of something entertaining us. Mm-hmm. And so, when do we have moments of boredom now?
It's hard to be bored these days, for sure. Like, and it's the end of the world even for my kids if the internet's out or their phone dies or, whatever the thing might be.
Yeah. I'll never forget, my son's 5, and he's always watched streaming things on Disney, Netflix, whatever that might be. And we were on vacation once and they didn't have a streaming service. So we just found Disney Junior on TV, and a commercial came on. And he was like flipping out, he's like, who changed it? And we're like, oh, he's doesn't
never
know
experienced
what a commercial
Like
is.
you got to sit and this is before you could skip,
yes,
or pay to not have a commercial.
Yes, right. Yeah, it's tough. But
it's
when it comes to ADHD, it's easy to go through life if you do not have the behavioral aspects. where you're a behavioral problem in school and your classroom. Because with ADHD, you're either the hyperactivity type or the inattentive type, or you can have a combination of both. So the hyperactivity type's the one that really gives a bad rap for ADHD because it's the stereotypical kid who's like can't sit still, is bouncing off the walls, throwing things around and rolling on the ground, climbing under the desk, right? Because their body is, If that's not you and you're more the inattentive type, you can wear that perfection mask. You can get good enough grades and move through and not be drawing attention to yourself. But internally, they struggle.
Freaking out. Yeah. That's me for sure. The other side of it too, and I'll get off this topic in a second. I want to keep going on this, but I think the reason I've been able to correct some of this or create strategies, because the other side of me is like problem solver.
Right.
So I think it's like, again, I think what I have is like a perfect combination of superpowers, or at least that's what I'm telling myself, because I feel great about all of it. I'm like, well, that's awesome. Like, you know what? I hate reading emails. Who cares?
Right. Hire somebody to read them for you.
Yeah. Like, tell me what this says. I don't, it's like, I want to do the stuff I'm good at, and that's where we'll thrive. And problem solving and like getting things organized. So I'm just, bam, I can be efficient. Yeah. Super interesting stuff.
It is.
So I want to go back to a few things you said, Kendall and her lack of, the child not likely to have PTSD and things like that was triggered some thoughts and concerns that I've had for Kendall of like in the future having mental health issues with going through this as a child. Like, is she, I've wondered, is she more likely to have a drug addiction or alcohol addiction or something because of some of this she's going through, or because she's taking a lot of medications now or whatever. And those are fears and thoughts that I've had that I'm like, okay, I need to keep an eye on this for some period of time, or just making sure that we're aware of it. Is she showing any signs of addiction now? And like, those are real things that I've thought about, which thankfully she doesn't. Usually if she's in a lot of pain for something, like she takes oxycodone for pain. It's a small dose. I mean, she's 49 pounds. She doesn't need a lot of it. It's a small dose. And she doesn't like the way it makes her feel. She'd rather have the pain and not take the medication than take it. And a lot of times, not to say a lot of times, sometimes I will almost force it on her because she's been going hours in agony and crying and pain. I'm like, all right, like, you need to take this. It's not going to get any better right now. Your tumor is shrinking. Your organs are moving. Like, a lot is happening inside your body. This isn't like, you need to take this because it's not going to go away. Right. So that's made me feel better. That she's like, no, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. So, but I still have those fears. And I don't know if there's any data that says anything, but.
No, I don't have that off the top of my head. However, I do feel like your fear of that, I assume, is probably because I think you even talked about in your podcast where you were breaking this down, how did you not catch this? How did you not see, some bloating in her belly or whatever it might be, right? So now there's going to be this overcompensation for wanting to see the early signs of everything.
Not even that, to be honest with you. It's because there's other people that that we're around that have addiction, and it terrifies me for my family to have to deal with any of that. Right. Because it's awful.
But now your brain's connecting, someone who does have an active addiction to your daughter who's taking a prescribed medication at an appropriate dose at appropriate times, being divvied out by parents of an appropriate age. Right. The risk factor is a lot less. Now, it's likely if she never had cancer that she could still grow up and be an addict. Sure. Right. It just happens. Now, in my opinion, a lot of addiction is stemming from trauma. It's an attempt to self-medicate for something
covering
internal,
something up.
Right, that you just haven't taken the time to talk about or have gotten the opportunity to talk about. And so when it comes to this, I think as long as you keep doing what you're doing right now, which is communicating with her at an age-appropriate level, making sure you're looking for signs of her wanting it more or something like that, right? Because the body can create a dependence to it. Right. Now, I look at there being a dependence a little bit different than an addiction, but they can go hand in hand. So I think it's...
Well, that dependence can create that addiction.
Exactly, right, over time. Now, I think as long as you are being strategic about, her taking the medication when it's appropriate and things of that sort, I think it is a great sign that she's not really loving the feeling that the medication gives, because it does create a different feeling. And if she's wanting to be more present and alive, that feeling is going to numb things out a lot more. That medication, I mean. So if she's not really loving it, then I think we can kind of lean into that right now. I think if that changes,
definitely made me feel better when she got to that point where she's, before she didn't know what she was taking, right? The doctors are like, all right, she needs to take this every 6 hours, And this is like, you're dealing with lots of cancer stuff, lots of painful stuff, huge tumors. Well, you're like, yeah, I'm sure she needs pain medication, Right. And then it's like, okay, now we can do it as needed. And it was like, this hurts or that hurts. And I'm like, how bad? Like 1 to 10. That's always like where are we at in the scale of like, it just kind of hurts. Or is it like, it's a 10 and we need to do,
Right. And I love rating scales. I think they're great because numbers don't really lie. Words.
Yeah. It hurts.
Yeah. Right. What does that mean?
How bad? Right. A lot. Like what's a lot?
Right.
What does good mean? Right.
Right. Exactly. And I think if you use that even with emotions, right? With your older daughter, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you for your sister? Right? And they can give a number, and we don't really have to ask much more information gathering questions because it gives us a pretty clear picture immediately, right? If, she comes home from school and says, I had a bad day, and you say on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was it? And she says 8, 9, 10, right?
Oh, we should talk about this. Like, okay, what's going on?
But if it's a 2, okay. Yeah. All right. You need some ice cream.
Yeah. Right.
But trauma is a really interesting thing because trauma is relative. You can take 2 people in the exact same situation, saw the exact same thing happen, and one can walk away completely, typical, normal, if you want to call it. And then the other
unbothered
one,
by it.
Unbothered, that they processed it properly. And the other one can walk away and end up having PTSD symptoms. And, there's a lot of studies now trying to look at like pre-existing things of cortisol levels or genetics and things like that could be, determine that this person may be more likely to walk away from, if they're in the military or whatnot.
Well, it was like that shooting in the parking garage. For example, I was when that happened, my wife and I were in the middle of switching out sort of shifts at the hospital. We usually do 4 or 5 days at a time, and then we'll switch. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go home with the other girls, and you'll stay here. And if we're there for these long stints, because it's a lot to be there, and it's a lot on one parent at home too with the baby, and like how it goes. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a lot.
Yep. So
it gives us a chance to kind of switch roles, and it's like it's still a lot either way, but it's a different thing. You switched it up. 2 different uncomfortables. And you get to spend time with the kids, both kids, or all 3 kids separately or whatever. So, but we were in the middle of switching out when that shooting thing happened. And once it got all settled, and like I was talking to investigators, we were looking at security footage. I helped them ID guys, and then everything was good. Everything was settled. I'd written my statements, and I was like, okay, I need to get home because I got to get the other kids and blah, 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 get dinner going. And, it's a whole thing. Well, then Brandy called me. She's like, they keep sending people to the room to check on you to make sure you're okay. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't get shot. They're like, no. They sent like a therapist up, and they sent like all these people they keep sending to make sure you don't need to talk about it and you're okay. I'm like, and she said she laughed at them, and she's like, no. He's fine. He's built for this. Like, he's totally fine. But it makes sense now that you're saying like the trauma and the potential for PTSD. And well, but let me take a step back because now I'm thinking of another thought that I had recently when I went back to the hospital last week. I had like trust issues, like real trust issues. Like every time a door opened, and I'm like waiting for something to pop off, I'm like, and it's not like I was waiting, but I was like, is there going to be something on the other side of this door? Is there something around this corner? Is that guy walking past me going to be cool? And then you get like these trust issues for a minute. So which is, I don't know if you call that PTSD, but it's kind of like,
we would call that acute stress disorder.
Okay.
Right. Which is essentially, PTSD symptoms
small scale.
Right after. But if that lasted for 6 months and you were still feeling that way, next year, right, then that's a little bit more.
It's kind of like, I have to imagine it's a lot like you're driving in a car and you're going a little fast and you pass a cop and you're like, ooh, or a cop comes up behind you with the lights on and then they go around you and pull over the other guy. And you're like, suddenly you're driving like, you're like sweating bullets for a minute and then you're driving like perfect for like 10 minutes and that kind of calms. And then you go back to driving a little fast to loosen up a little. So that's.
Yeah. And so you want to know like how trauma impacts the brain of why you were feeling that way.
Yeah.
So what we've learned over time through brain scans is, so there's a small little part of our brain called the amygdala. It is responsible for fight or flight, right? So the fear, it's the piece that kicks in that adrenaline without us even really having to put much thought into, I need to be scared right now. And so that part of the brain after trauma, and again, once again, trauma is relative. When trauma is experienced, that part of the brain becomes hyperactive. So it is going to be on guard a lot more. So that like, who's behind this door? Somebody behind me, right?
What was that noise? Yeah.
Right. You know, the old World War II vets, Vietnam vets who didn't want to sit with their back to anybody, right? They want to sit in the corner where they can see the whole room. So that is because that part of the brain is now on the go all the time.
Which is probably exhausting.
It is. Yes.
Because you're on high alert.
Yep.
Hyper focused on all these small things.
Yep. It's like, think about being on a roller coaster and having adrenaline going all the time, and never getting really a break from that. And so the amygdala talks with the hippocampus, which the hippocampus is the part of our brain that's responsible for, memories, right? Short-term, long-term memories. And that part of the brain tends to shrink. And so because it shrinks, when we feel that fear, that amygdala kicks in and it's trying to communicate with our past memories, a lot of the times it's just going to pull the memories that are the most scary. And so it's reminding you of why you need to be scared. And then the frontal cortex of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, is the part that's responsible for kind of regulating our emotions. And that part shrinks as well. So it's a lot harder for us to regulate that emotion of fear. So all that combination in our brain makes it a lot more difficult for us to enjoy life.
And that's on the PTSD side of things,
right?
Not so much this with the acute.
You can have some of that with the acute, but the long lasting effects of the brain and that kind of thing, not so much. It's like you were explaining with that driving, right? Where it's like, okay, I can regulate back to my old belief systems. So as a trauma therapist, I use a trauma approach called EMDR, which is a mouthful. It stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And so it does utilize eye movement. Now it's not hypnotizing. We're not trying to get somebody to dissociate and act like a duck. Yeah, that would be really, really weird in a therapy session. But what it's doing is it's mimicking the rapid eye movement, the REM sleep. So what we have learned, again, through brain scans and sleep studies, is that when people get into REM sleep, their eyes are darting back and forth, right? I don't know if you've ever watched your kids when they're sleeping and that you just kind of see their eyes moving behind their eyelids. And what we've learned is that creates what's called a bilateral stimulation. So the left brain and the right brain are active at the same time, which is not typical when we're just awake, right? We can be more in our left brain, which is communication and language and rationale and facts. And the right brain is more emotion and creativity and sensation. Now, depending on a person's personality, they may be more emotional, right? They may be more creative, right? Taylor Swift's going to break up with somebody and write a beautiful song, right? But then you take airplane pilots or military or first responders, they do not have, honestly, because they're trained to be non-emotional, they have this period where they are looking at facts and logic a lot more than how they feel. Now, what we are looking for is a healthy balance between the two, right? How do I feel about this, but also what are the facts and logic? And so for you, after you have that police car behind you and then he goes around you, right, your logical brain kicks in and says, okay, he wasn't pulling me over. I'm okay. I can drive now, right? Now, what happens with trauma is that can tend to get stuck, and it gets stuck in our right brain. The memory does. So every time we think of it or we're triggered, we have something we smell, we see, we hear, we touch, we taste, brings us back to that memory, then we are flooded with the exact same level of emotion that we had when it was happening, when the trauma was taking place. So it's the stereotypical war veteran who hears the loud boom and jumps under a desk.
Shell shock.
Right. Which was the old name for
PTSD.
Right. Or a soldier's heart, they used to call it as well.
Yeah.
So
the difference, go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, so it is looking at how can we get that stuck point and reprocess it to a spot where the belief system changes, right? So if I get into a car accident and now my trauma tells me driving is dangerous, where I never necessarily used to have that belief system, that's what in trauma treatment we're trying to target. People get really scared because they're like, I don't really want to talk about all the details. I don't want to talk about the trauma. It's too disturbing to me, right? And again, it's because it's stuck in that right brain, and they will feel that same emotion and they're scared of that emotion. So it's looking at, okay, if we can get them a bilateral stimulation utilizing eye movement, and I can tell you more about that if you want to know, but that allows new neural pathways to be created so that the brain actually communicates properly. So in layman's terms, I would say it's taking something from your long-term memory, putting it at the front of your brain, and then letting it get flooded with emotion and logic and facts. And so the flooding of both sides of the brain allows your brain to actually heal.
Interesting. So the left and right side of the brain being broken up like that is a lot of my day is switching back and forth with both different sides of the brain, right? Where it's like I'm thinking of a new product and we need to develop this new bag and these cool features and I want it to look like this, and we're sewing and we're in the sort of flow state of cool ideas and whatever, and then it's like, and then at 1:00 I've got to go have a meeting about taxes and spreadsheets and stuff that's like important and necessary and factual, and it's black and white and it's math formulas and whatever, and then it's like cool, and then after that I'm gonna go back to this bag and have to finish it, and it's like, where were we? And it's like, okay, get back to this flow state. Is that a normal challenge for people to have? Like, I assume that's normal to be challenging to kind of go back and forth, because a flow, they call it a flow state because it's, and a lot of people, like seek that out, right? Whether they're doing drugs to get into this, like musicians or whatever, right? Like, oh, we got to go smoke some weed so we can write a song or whatever. It's like getting into this flow state. And you sort of, I hold that on a pedestal. If I can get to that point, it's like I don't want to let go of it, because it's like super powerful place to be. And a lot of times you have those moments, those are those shower moments, right? Where you're not thinking about anything else and it's just like nothing else really matters. You're just showering and then you're like, ooh, I've got an idea. And that's probably why, right? Because you're not thinking, in those moments, you're not thinking about, oh, I got to reply to this email. I got to do this thing. You're just like doing.
And a lot of times you're going to hear from folks who are runners, right? They run marathons or triathlons and or just run for exercise. A lot of times they think that they have the
solitude while they're running.
Well, the solitude while they're running, but they feel like they have more clarity after the run. And a lot of it is because that, if they're keeping up a good pace, a typical pace, that left foot pounding the ground is activating the right brain. The right foot pounding the ground is activating the left brain. So runners actually can get a little bit of that same bilateral stimulation if they keep that pace up. And so that's why a lot of times they feel they have clarity, because they are activating their left and right brain at the same time. And so they're creating these new neural pathways. Their brain's communicating more properly, and they come out of it feeling clear-headed.
Interesting.
Right.
Does that happen in any other form of exercise or just running?
It's more so even within EMDR therapy. So the research really started in, I guess, back 1989, I think it was. But they utilized like actually following a finger, right? So, I would kind of sit over to the right of you and you would just look at my hand, and I would, go at a pace and you would just follow that back and forth, and that would mimic that rapid eye movement. Now, what we've learned though is, depending on people's personalities or, if they deal with migraines, things of that sort, that eye movement by following something is not always the most effective. So there's tactile. So there's, this equipment that I have that a person will hold one in their right hand, one in their left hand, and it vibrates back and forth. So it'll vibrate in this hand, vibrate in this hand. You can also use auditory, where the tone will go in your right ear, left ear, and it's all in the
Just makes your brain focus on left, right, left, right.
Right. It's that tapping of this side of my body, this side of my body, that's activating the brain.
Does that happen in swimming or biking or when you're?
I'm not sure.
I just wondered because
you're going to get a lot of endorphins from exercise that are going to make people feel good and better about themselves anyway. But in terms of that bilateral stimulation,
I just wonder because I would almost run just for that reason, but I can't. I've broken both my knees; they're a mess, so it hurts.
Right.
But that's why I'm wondering, are there other forms of does biking do that? I could ride a bike all day long. It's low impact. It doesn't hurt my knees. Swimming, I might sink, but dad bod over here.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
No,
so the EMDR, that's right. EMDR.
Yep.
It's literally just that, just a left and right stimulation basically. And historically it was just eye movement.
Right.
And now it's kind of gone to these other things.
Now we've got the other options, right? Yeah, because some people they feel like they can get back into their memory a lot more by closing their eyes. So then if they're holding those and that tactile is going back and forth, and it's still getting that same benefit. Now, just for those of you who are interested or considering EMDR therapy, we're not just doing that for 60 minutes of a session. It's not like we're just going to get your head super activated and send you out. It's
follow this for
right. I always talk about it. It's like the prep work honestly takes longer than the actual processing because, for example, if I was going to help you paint this room, it would take us longer to prep the room than to actually paint.
Right.
So what we're doing in the prep work with EMDR is trying to figure out what is the core belief system that came from your trauma, right? Is it that you feel responsible? Is it that you feel not good enough? Is it that you feel like you almost died? Is it that you feel guilty or that you're unlovable or unworthy? And so looking at what is the belief system that you are carrying around with you through life.
Get to the root
right.
of this.
And so then we're trying to say, okay, what's a more adaptive belief system? So if somebody's saying I'm responsible and it's my fault I'm responsible and I'm responsible for everybody around me, then the more adaptive belief system would be I can recognize appropriate responsibility. I'm not responsible for everything, but I can recognize when it is appropriate for me to feel responsible versus I'm just responsible for everything. So it is, it's a beautiful treatment. It when I went and did the training for it, it completely altered my whole approach at working with people in general, whether it's trauma or not, just because those belief systems are in everybody. We all have something that shame inside of us that's torturing us, I guess, in a way, is really important to identify, just like with ADHD symptoms, right? Identifying the skills that can help me feel more productive and accomplish more and be more successful. Same thing with our internal self. If we don't understand this belief system that we're carrying around, then there's not much we can do about it. And it's controlling us versus us being in control. So in terms of the processing, it's quick. It is not a long drawn out thing. It's, a lot of the researchers, I think it was almost 80% success rate, which is unbelievable with PTSD and trauma that people avoid dealing with and talking about. So it could be anywhere from, a couple sessions to, 6, 12 sessions. It just depends on, is it one trauma that we're targeting, or is it, more complex trauma? Is it a big T trauma, which we look at as the life-threatening things, right? The plane crash, the wars, the terrorist attacks, right? To little T traumas, which might be being bullied in middle school, right? But it impacted you to the core. And, I had a woman I worked with once who wore a skirt to middle school. for the first time she ever wore a skirt, and a bunch of guys were making sexual comments. And from then on, she wore jeans and a hoodie.
That's probably ever since then.
Ever since then.
Won't wear a skirt anymore.
Right.
Ever again.
Nope.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
what do you know about the psychedelics and some of those therapies? Do you know anything about that stuff? I've seen like a lot of veterans and stuff that I follow and pay attention to who have done some of those.
Yeah.
And they like swear by it. And I haven't really researched it, or I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's like these crazy psychedelic experiences that they're like swear by.
Yeah.
What do you know about it? Anything?
So there's a really great show on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind. I think there's a book as well, and I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but the research started a long time ago, but then with pretty much the hippies and dropping out of college and, you know, Woodstock and all of that, then the government, I think, really did not like that people were dropping out of college, and so that became criminalized. And because it became criminalized, all the research stopped. And it's unfortunate because there are so many really incredible aspects to psychedelics.
Yeah. And a lot of these people, the people that are doing it are having to go to Mexico or wherever to do it, right? They're not.
It's funny you say that, because I've actually got a client who recently is, I think I'm seeing her this week and I'm excited for the update, but she is doing an ashwagandha. And she, I think, went to Florida for it. There's a church that you can become a member of, and that gives that, I think, religious freedom to be able to do it and experience it, because ashwagandha especially is very much known for its spiritual awakening within it. So there are, I've just recently found this out from my client,
US.
Right. In the US, there are those options where you can do it that way.
I think DMT, that's the big one.
That one, you know,
mushrooms,
mushrooms have become the, you know, magic mushrooms have become the really face of this research, the microdosing and things of that sort. But then there's LSD, the DMT, there's a lot of really amazing benefits to it. And it's hard to deny what you see in the research with it. There's also a guy, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. It's called Huberman Labs podcast. Andrew Huberman. Yep. He's a research neuroscientist with Stanford. And so what he realized is people do not have access to the updated research. And so unless you're going to go read, right, a scholarly article, which most people are not going to do.
And I won't comprehend it.
Right. I would have to read it 6 times to know what it's telling me.
But I could watch a video on it and
or listen to a podcast, right? Yeah. And so his podcasts are very deep, but he just recently released an episode all about the research on that. So if anybody's interested or wants to understand the pros and cons, I would definitely encourage you to go listen to him, because his stuff is on point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is there. It is an option. I think there's a lot of stigma around hallucinogenic psychedelics. And so it's just like anything in life. Once you start opening it up and it becomes something that is available for treatment purposes, then, you know, there's always going to be the critics, and then the people who are diehards, like, I'm going to microdose every day. And, but it can really change the brain.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Interesting. What else is good? What else you been up to?
Oh man, you know, it's just my daughter played club volleyball for the first time, and I never played volleyball, so I was never really. I played pickup beach volleyball
like
with my friends in high school, but getting into like organized volleyball, especially with 13, 14-year-old girls and the amount of drama and everything, it was pretty.
My daughter wants to play next year.
It's competitive, man. It is really, really competitive. I had no idea. It is like
serious business.
Serious. Yeah. It's life or death for a lot of them. But she's loving it. And, you know, for me as a dad, getting to watch her fall in love with something like that.
It's cool.
It's unbelievable.
Did she do gymnastics or anything younger?
You know, she tried gymnastics. She thought she was amazing. Wasn't really. She's just not built like a gymnast. She's tall and lanky, and it just was not her. She tried soccer, and she was the second tallest and second worst. And then, she did ballet for a long time, and she really loved ballet, and she's built more like a ballerina. And so she really was great with it. However, it just wasn't
for
something.
her.
Yeah, it wasn't something she was passionate about. And I really don't even know what kicked off volleyball for her, but to see her dive in, I mean, she carries a volleyball with her everywhere she goes. She's hitting, she's getting reps all the time. As all she wanted for Christmas was a rebounder and shoes and a backpack and all this stuff. And so I've just really been excited to watch that in her, and not only the passion, but to see her get better.
Yeah. Like watching your kids fall in love with an activity, a sport or something, and then get really good at it. And then you can like cheer for them. Like I never in a million years I never thought about it until it happened. And my daughter, when she was much younger, was like really big into gymnastics, and she was really good. And she was like first, second, third place at state championship stuff. Wow. And it was so much fun to go, to the travel competitions and get out of town. It was like the family event, and we just like all went. We cheered her on. She kicked ass. It was so cool, so fun. But then, because she was good, this is where it sort of is unfortunate, especially at such a young age. It's like because she was so good, then the pressure was on, right? And you get back and you got to practice. And she was, you're talking, what was it? Maybe 3-4 hours a day, like 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, it was a lot of practice in a hot gym with no air conditioning in South Carolina. Right. It's like, and then it was like, you got to do better. You got to go harder. Don't stop. Keep going. You got to win this thing. And it was like, then when you're 7-8 years old at that time, it was like, it started to suck the fun out of it. The expectations, the pressure was too much, and it became not fun anymore. Yeah. And she was like, yeah, I'm done. I was like, what? No, wait a minute. You were so good at this. Right. What do you mean you're done? Yeah. And I still tease her to this day, and I feel kind of bad sometimes. Now it's just like a running joke. Something she'll say something about gymnastics, or I'm like, oh, remember when you used to do gymnastics and then you quit? Right. She's like, ha ha ha, Right. She used to get really mad at me, and then I quit doing it for a while, and we're all sort of over it. It's not so much a fresh wound anymore, but I still tease her about it because she was so good. And it was like, I ran into another gymnastics dad at Lowe's recently, and we were catching up about Kendall, and he was asking about Kendall and all that kind of stuff. And then we were talking about gymnastics, and I asked if his daughter was still doing it. He's like, no. He's like, but I just told my wife this morning how much I missed it. And I was like, me too. Like it was so fun to cheer. It's so cool to cheer your kids on when they're good at something, whatever it is, gymnastics, cheerleading, basketball, volleyball, soccer, whatever. Like chess, seeing your kids excel at something is such a cool thing as a parent. Right. It's really cool.
And it, you were talking about like the traveling and the going places, and because with her club, it was 3-4 hours away every other weekend, and so it's a big commitment in terms of even financial commitment. But I really enjoyed the getting to know the other parents, because you're all kind of trauma bonded in a way where you're stuck in this gym all weekend. My watch keeps going off saying this is too loud, and this decibel level is not good for your ears, and so having these like evenings where you're hanging out at a hotel with these other parents, and you're all in the same
in the same boat
together. Where we probably wouldn't be friends necessarily otherwise.
You probably have nothing else in common,
right?
Other than your parents, and your kids are playing a sport together. Yeah. I found that fun too. We'd like the whole team would go out to dinner or whatever, and pizza, and you get to like bond with these other people that they don't go to the same schools, and you wouldn't have met or been friends with them otherwise.
Exactly.
Cool.
But it was neat to, just get to experience that. And I'm sure she's just going to keep playing. I mean, she's doing beach volleyball now. So, but it's just a very interesting dynamic as a parent.
Well, it's cool too, because a lot of times those types of things and activities take a lot of other stuff out of the equation. Like when your kids are competing, like politics don't matter. This doesn't matter. How much money you make, your car, none of that crap matters. It's like our kids are doing really well at this thing together. Exactly. That's the only thing that matters. Yeah. It is cool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, how about you? How are you, how do you feel like you're balancing work life now with, hospitals and chemo.
Yeah, it's tough. We do our best to make sure we're being present at the hospital for Kendall, but the business has to continue too. So depends on like how long I'm at the hospital and what days we're there and like days of the week. Cause a lot of times we're there on like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, come home Monday. So I'm like, I don't have to work too much about work cause it's like a long weekend and I'm not stressing about somebody's waiting for me to reply to an email and whatever. But then when we're there for weeks or months at a time, I'm doing Zoom meetings from the hospital room and I'm doing whatever and I'm making videos and I'm, whatever the thing is. And Kendall likes to be a part of that when she can, so I do my best to incorporate her into stuff and I don't exclude her from things. And a lot of times if she's just gone through chemo and she's like heavily medicated, she's just sleeping a lot. So I just
take advantage of those moments.
Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, I'll get some work done. She's sleeping for the next 2 days,
Right. But that's a lot of transitioning gears, right? Transitioning, talking to this doctor, getting an update, and then having to do a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, it's tough because you're on high alert because there's lots of equipment and machines, and she's hooked up to stuff, and you're waiting. You're like, things are beeping, and you're like, what's going on? Is this, why is that thing beeping? And it's usually nothing. Yeah. And now I've gotten to like learn the equipment. I'm like halfway to my medical degree. I feel like at this point I've learned so much.
You're a genius, right?
Yeah, of course. I'm the smartest person I know.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of like, you get used to things, what's what, it's not new and scary anymore. And then you can balance it better. And then it's just like, it's become normal. It's just like every day. It's like, it's like, I'm on Zoom calls again, with people and they're like, are you in the hospital? I'm like, oh, my daughter's got cancer and we're here, and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Anyway, so, so let's talk about this thing. And it's like, it's just become normal for better or worse. Now,
have you found that people are awkward and talking to you about it? It's one of those things, like, I think sometimes people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry is not, it's like, it's not my fault. Why
I don't, honestly, I don't put much weight into how people like feel awkward about it, because I know that their intention isn't to be awkward. Sure. And they are usually, most of the people that say something, know us, and they follow Facebook or the YouTube channel, and they kind of have an idea, and they're just asking like how Kendall is, like, how's Kendall, how's she doing? I would see the updates. She looks great. I'm glad she, and it's like quick little back and forth, and that's that. I did find myself a few times making it awkward for other people. And it was when it was like really fresh and new, and it was like the only thing on my mind, and I'd,
what would you do?
Well, I had there'd be conversations happening with a couple different people, and they're like, oh, how's everything going? Everything good? I'm like, I just found out my daughter's got cancer. And they're like, oh my God. And they're like, I don't know what to say now. I shouldn't have asked this guy how he was doing, and it's like this whole thing. And I'm like, man, I probably shouldn't have just dumped that on this poor guy,
Right.
But it was like so new and fresh. It was like the only thing I could talk about. It was like, I could have been like, oh yeah. And now I'm like, yeah, everything's good. Everything's cool, whatever. And I don't even mention Kendall as a thing unless somebody knows and they ask about it. But it was like in that first few weeks, it was like, well, let me tell you how it's going.
Right. Well, it's funny because I think, a lot of times we ask that question like, hey, how are you doing? When it's just a passing thing.
It is. And that's what I've
really always
had to remember.
The real answer.
It's like, do you really want to know?
Yeah.
And it depends on who's asking. Mm-hmm. And I know their level of intention or whatever that might be, where it's like one of my best friends, like, hey man, how's everything going? You're like, well, it's going like this, versus somebody you haven't seen 2 years at Lowe's. And like, hey, what's up, man? How's it going? And you're like, it's going, it's good. Everything's cool.
Right. Let me give you the surface level answer.
Like, do they really want to know? They're just asking, they're saying hi, like, hi is what they're saying.
Exactly.
That's what they're saying.
Right. I just want to have an interaction, a quick 2-second interaction with you to connect and then move on. But I started even a long time ago, just because I used to say I'm good or I'm fine. I'm like, I'm not really always good and fine. And so now I just say I'm hanging in.
Yeah. It's like,
that's how I feel a lot.
I'm usually great. And I'm especially grateful these days. Like this whole thing with Kendall, I'm again, going back to the very first few sentences of this podcast, was like, I'm generally very positive. Like, I look at everything as the glass is half full. There's plenty of negativity in the world, and I don't want to be part of it. And I try to eliminate as much of it as I can. And I certainly don't want to add to it. So it's like, I'm good. Like, I know I look at things in the world and I see enough negativity, especially from our own community, where I get parents, sending DMs and comments, and we get emails of parents wanting to return their gear because their baby passed and they don't need it anymore. And it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine. So I get this, in some cases, I think a unique perspective of like, just be grateful for what you got, because it could all go away. And the world's been good to me. We've been very fortunate. I've put a lot of hard work in, and it's rewarded me, and we have a great life. Even though Kendall has cancer, it's like, it could be worse. And I know that it could be worse. So I'm like, I'm fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And
that's a beautiful perspective to have. Cause I even remember one thing I was listening to you where you were talking about, you just wish she could be back at home making bad mistakes, right? Not cleaning a room.
Well, and that's the sort of goes back to the perspective of you're scrolling through Facebook and you see a parent just, complaining about, I think in that example, I said something about missing a soccer goal, and it's like the end of the world and everything's going to come crashing down because they missed this goal and they lost the game. It's like, be grateful your kid's healthy enough to run around on the soccer field. How about that? Why don't you start there?
Yeah.
And like, that's the kind of things that just bug the hell out of me.
We take a lot of things for granted.
We do.
I think about my big toe on my foot, right? Like I never think about it. But if I hurt it, or if I stub it, or if somebody loses that toe and they have to relearn how to walk,
balance and
it's so many things. Like even my tongue, like I never think about my tongue until I bite it, right? But I mean, it's an amazing part of our body that swoops food and doesn't get chomped. It's like, playing Mario Brothers and not trying to get smashed in things. And it is like an amazing thing that I never think about. But all this is gratitude. And I think, this cheesy gratitude's the best attitude, right? But if we don't take time to actually focus on, the perspectives that could be worse, right? We're always going to be drawn to the negative. I mean, news is negative. Our world is full of negative. Negativity sells. So finding ourselves being grateful for what we have and not thinking I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when I graduate, or I'll be happy when I make more money.
The grass is not greener on the other side.
Well, it could be, but once you get there and you realize you have to fertilize it and you have to mow it and you have to keep bugs out of it, right? It's like, it's work to stay happy, because happy is the root word of happening, where we feel happy when something happens. It's temporary, it's fleeting, but we chase it no matter what. Every product we try to wrap up into happy. Marry who makes you happy. Find a job that makes you happy. But I think it comes down to, how can we just be present and mindful of where we are? And meditation, mindfulness is key. And even if it's just stopping for 5 minutes and just being grateful that you're alive, being grateful that you have a vehicle to get to work, being grateful that your kids aren't sick, being grateful that you have enough money to pay the bills this month, right? It's the small stuff. Mm-hmm. Because there's always something else we can have, want, need, toys.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that stuff. I love those things, and that a lot of my passion for those things is what motivates me to just keep going. It's like, right now, like my big thing has always been, I just want a helicopter. Like, so
I want you to have a helicopter.
Whether I get there or not, I don't know, but that's sort of like the carrot at the end of the stick that I'm trying to get to. That's just going to keep me going.
Yeah.
So it's like,
but then as soon as you have a helicopter, there's going to be something else.
Yeah, I need a yacht to land it on. But those are the types of things, because I like those items, and like, whether you call it materialistic or not, I don't know. I just like the experiences of what those things provide.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, why not who doesn't want a helicopter, a jet? Like, want that. It'll motivate you to keep going and do things and be successful and provide. And it's not, for me, it's not about money for me. It's like, you have to have money to buy those things, but I'm just looking for the experience.
Right.
I like the fun, the joy that those things provide. Right. So it's like, I have to make money to get those things, but I don't really care about making money. I just care about the experience.
Right.
So I think that's interesting.
And there's always a big difference between what we want and what we need.
Of course. I don't need much. I could go get on my RV and live with like next to nothing and be perfectly happy, because I'm like experiencing things. Right. Right. Another sort of bummer that happened for us recently, we had to put our dog down last week, and Kendall, this is something I had to put a lot of thought and strategy into the timing of. Because, so Hans is a dog that's had quite the reputation around town for many, many years. He's 14. Very few people ever got to know him, but everybody knew about him. He was a dog that lived at my old car shop. He was security. He was big, sharp, scary teeth. And he kept things under control over there because we had a lot of break-ins at that shop. A lot of cars got broken into, and radios and seats and stuff stolen, windows smashed. It was really annoying. So I got Hans. Hans was awesome, German Shepherd. He was a great dog. He was super loyal to us, and eventually I moved out of that shop and dynamic changed. He came home. He was there for every time a kid came home from the hospital. He was awesome with the kids. He was it was great. Kendall's very attached to animals. Like, again, she goes to the hospital. She has to see every dog there, and she's very attached to animals. We put another dog down a few years back, Moxie, who was like 16. We get these really long living dogs. It's great.
Good for you.
We get to spend some time with them.
Yeah.
But she talks about Moxie every day like she's still alive. She tells all the nurses about Moxie as if she's still alive. And it's always this weird thing for me because they're like, do you have any dogs at home? Yeah, I've got 2. I'm like, well, you kind of only have 1, And then I don't say, I quit saying anything. I just let it go now. And it's like this awkward, because I don't think she realizes that she's talking about Moxie like she was passed away 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
And then the nurse or the person bringing the dog in or whoever's asking her about it will start to say things. And then Kendall looks at me like, oh, I made it sound like Moxie's still alive, didn't I? And I'm like, just keep going with it. It's like this visual communication. I'm like, just roll with it, Yeah. And she sleeps with Moxie's urn, in her little box of ashes. She sleeps with her every night. And she's got like 12 stuffed animal dogs all named Moxie. So she's very attached to these animals. So Hans, we just put down last week. Again, awesome German Shepherd. And I knew it was going to crush her. And she's getting ready to go in for a 6-week treatment, a stem cell transplant. And Brandy and I are going to be there for a lot of it together. So it'll be weeks at a time where none of us are home and someone else has to be at our house to watch the dog and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, all right, well, that's 6 weeks that Hans is going to become someone else. And he's old. He was really old. His legs were giving out. He's using the bathroom all over the house. He's having a hard time. You got to carry him in and out of the house, up and down the stairs. It was a lot to take care of. And I knew that had Kendall not been doing this treatment, I wouldn't have even considered it yet. I've been carrying up and down the stairs for like 1.5 years. Like, I would have just kept doing that for the next however long. But it was getting bad. He's running into, he's got vestibular disease too. So it's an inner ear thing that causes his balance to be off, and his hips don't work well. So he's like a drunk sailor, like just banging into walls, pooping on the floor. And it was a lot, but we all loved him so much. We just put up with it. We dealt with it. We cleaned up after him. And I was like, all right, she's going into this treatment. I don't know that we should do it right before the treatment and have her go to the hospital with a broken heart into this massive treatment where she's going to feel like crap. And then it's going to be a real mind F. Right. Probably not a good idea. So maybe we'll wait till after the treatment. Well, shoot. Okay, that's 6 weeks. He's someone else's problem. And then what? She's going to come home feeling like crap and trying to recover and then break her heart then? Right. That's not a way to recover. That's going to really screw with her. And then last week we had to go to the hospital for like 3 or 4 days for a series of tests, a bunch of workups, just to make sure she's healthy enough to get the treatment. Because the stem cell treatment, I'll explain in a second if you're not familiar with it, and I'll share with everybody. Kind of here's some updates on where Kendall's at, and I'll kind of give you all that. But so I was like, all right, well, we got to go do all these workups. We'll be out of the house for 3 or 4 days, and we're all going to be gone. So again, it's like someone else's problem for the next 4 days, and then we're home for a week, and then we're going to this transplant. So I was like, man, we kind of have to do it like now. Like if we're going to put him down. And it's like, then you start to realize that it's like, I'm only hanging on to him for me. Like his quality of life sucked. Right. You know, we were hanging on to him as a family. Yeah. Like sort of selfishly. Right. In a way. Because like his quality of life sucked. He's just waiting around for someone else to pick him up and carry him outside to go to the bathroom and then pick him up and set him back down in the house. And then he's going to fall and bang his head into things and try to get to his food, and then he's going to wait for someone to show up. Yeah. Like that sucks. Like he's been good to us, you know, and all that sort of thing. So I was like, let's schedule, we'll take him in. We took him last Tuesday and then immediately went to the hospital for all these tests. And we stayed at a hotel, which was fun and exciting. And there was a pool. So it was like, kind of took their mind off of the dog situation. Yeah. And then we'll be home for the next, week and a half before we go to this treatment. Mm-hmm. And by then she'll be sort of mentally recovered from that and be able to go into this treatment with a better positive attitude. So that's the way I thought about it. That was my rationale on the timing. And I had to strategize, really put a lot of weight and thought into like the timing of when we put our dog down, which sucked to have to do because you're like playing God, right? Like I get to choose when he goes, and that's it's
a
heavy.
weird feeling.
It is, putting a dog down sucks no matter how you slice it. But
exactly.
Anyway, so that sucks. But Kendall was a trooper. And same thing with Moxie. She wanted to be there. She wanted to go to the vet. She wanted to experience the whole thing, and she did it again with Hans, and she's a rock star.
But that's a perfect example of strategy versus avoidance, right? You could have just kept putting it off, right? We can find somebody, pay somebody enough to watch them while we're gone, but to put all that thought into what's going to work for you, for your daughters, for your family as a whole, right? Like
it felt selfish at the time, to be honest.
Sure.
It was like, oh, your dog's such an inconvenience, you're just going to kill him. Like that's kind of in the back of my mind how I felt, and even sort of how Brandy was verbalizing it to me, like, no, we can't just do that because Kendall has to go to the hospital. I'm like, but let's think about the big picture.
Right.
Like, and I didn't want it to feel like it was just a convenience thing. Like, well, we should do it because it's more convenient for everybody.
Right.
There was a very small portion of the consideration, but it was like, let's think about the big picture. Is he happy? Is he comfortable? If we wait, here's the implications. If we do it a little bit too soon or a little, it's like, I think now is just the best time to just do it.
And that's a perfect example of how our brain can really torture us, right? Even with the best intentions, with strategizing, with thinking about other people and not just thinking about ourselves and all of that, then our brain can still be like, you were selfish.
Yeah. And I also knew that I had to just stay strong-willed about it. And it was a very strong decision I had to make and be like, this is what needs to happen. Because I knew in my mind, I was like with a lot of conviction, like, we just have to do it this date.
Right.
Meanwhile, Brandy's like, no. And the kids are like, no. And I'm like, no, we have to do it now because I'm thinking this big picture and they're thinking today, and
sometimes we have to love someone or something enough to let go.
Yeah. It was tough, and it almost, made me feel like it appeared as if I didn't care about the dog, and that there was no emotion. Meanwhile, internally, I was kind of a mess, but I knew I had to sort of stay strong in my thoughts and beliefs on what I thought was right in order to see it through.
Right.
But then in that morning and that night before, I was a disaster.
Yeah.
I was a hot mess, and the day of, of course, obviously, and even the few days after. But I'm in a good place now with it. I think it was like definitely the right call. And it's interesting, the weight that's been lifted off my shoulders to not have to care for another thing, not to sound like I hated my dog or anything, but it's just like he was a lot to take care of. And I almost feel like I'm on vacation where you're like at a hotel and you don't have anything to worry about. It's like, that's how I feel at home now. And it's nice. It's weird. It's unfortunate, but it's nice. And now I can really focus on Kendall and this next series of treatments she has to go through.
Yeah. And that, it's a literal weight lifted because you're carrying
100-pound dog up and down the stairs multiple times a day.
Yeah. No, it's, I think about, I can't remember what year it was, but it was one of the hurricanes that hit Texas area, Rockport, I think it was, maybe Irma. I can't remember, but I went and did some volunteer work with Samaritan's Purse, and we were up on a roof, tarping this roof, and one of the supervisors that was there kind of overseeing everything, he's like, hey guys, the wind's picking up. We've got these tarps. If the wind catches the tarp, let it go. These are cheap tarps. We can get more tarps, but sometimes people are so scared to let go that it causes more damage, right? It's going to pull you off. So he's like, don't be scared to let go, right? But we don't want to lose things, and sadness is really the loss of something that we no longer have access to, right? And that's why we think of sadness the most with death. I no longer have access to petting that dog, to seeing that person. So allow yourself to feel sad, right? Allow yourself to experience the emotions, and then you will find your new normal and move on. But they're always going to hold a spot in your heart.
Mm-hmm. All right. So quick updates on Kendall,
please.
And then we'll wrap this up. So, I think the last podcast, as I sort of wrapped up, and if no one's followed anything, up to this point, she was diagnosed with with cancer called neuroblastoma. It's a rare childhood cancer. There's about 700-ish kids a year diagnosed with it. Usually like newborn to about 3 or 4 years old.
Really?
5 years old, And then, so she's a rare case where she's 9 and has this cancer. And the tumor was, it was 10 inches by 9 inches by 7 inches or something. It was like the size of your head inside of a 9-year-old's abdomen. It was humongous. I mean, it was huge. So she went through 5 rounds of chemo. After 4 rounds of chemo, it had shrunk down to 3 inches, like the size of a smallerness, but like maybe the size of a baseball, tennis ball sort of thing. It was pretty small. Still it was a 6.5-ish, about 6.5 hour surgery to remove it because it's like this really sticky tumor thing. It's not, you think of it, and it was hard as a rock. That was the thing. Like when we discovered it and we saw this like bulge in her stomach, it was hard as a rock. And I was like, when's the last time you went to the bathroom? Yeah. Right? Blah, blah, blah. We found out it's a tumor, yada, yada, yada. And that, real quick, let me touch on that because you talked about how it's like, man, how did I miss this? How did we not see this? And they said 99% of the time, it's someone that doesn't see the kid every day that discovers these things. It's grandma, it's a babysitter, it's someone at the daycare who, hasn't seen the kid for several days and suddenly they look different. But as a parent, you see your kid every day. And then at that age, at 8, 9 years old, like she showers herself, she gets dressed by herself. You're not seeing them, without their clothes on all the time.
Exactly.
So it took them to be like, my tummy hurts. And then it was Cameron, our oldest, who was like, hey, there's a lump on her stomach. You need to look at this. So that's how we discovered it. It was really her sister who kind of found that there was a problem. Wow. Which is pretty awesome of her to notice that, because who's going to
attentive, right?
Yeah. Right. That's, she's awesome. So anyways, 4 rounds of chemo and then had the surgery, had the tumor removed, a 6-hour surgery, and they had to like peel it off of things and cut it. And it's like this crazy thing. And she also lost her kidney, adrenal glands, some lymph nodes, like big surgery. And they're like, oh, she'll be back in no. I'm like, you guys, she's got like a 9 inches in across her abdomen. Yeah. Like they had to like move her intestines out of the way. And the recovery was sort of brutal, but within like 5 days, she's like back and doing like normal stuff. I'm like, how in the world? Right. She was very guarding her scar, and she had this G tube put into a feeding tube because they knew that through the next treatment, the stem cell transplant, they're likely going to have to feed her through a tube, and which we ended up having to do almost immediately anyways, because she was not feeling good immediately after the surgery, where they're like, okay, they give her nutrients through IVs and that sort of thing. But eventually it's like, we need to get something going through her gut because we have to have it processing. She has to be going to the bathroom and all these things start to have to happen. And I didn't realize this. A lot of the recovery process was really just waiting for her organs to wake up from anesthesia. You don't think about when you go to sleep under anesthesia, you think you're just like asleep, but your entire body is shut down, especially in a 6-hour surgery, which really was, probably even longer under anesthesia. So like your organs shut down, your gut shuts down, your intestines are shutting down, everything's really like asleep. Right. So it took like 6 days for that stuff to wake up and start to like work and function. And as it wakes up, it's been moved and shifted. So then there's a lot of pain associated with things. And then she had this thing installed in her stomach. So so then it's like the oxycodones and and you're like, which the problem with that is those types of drugs, the opioids, cause constipation, and we're trying to get her to go to the bathroom. So then it's Miralax and we need you to drink this, but then she's throwing it up, and it's like,
take this pill, but then take this to deal with the symptoms of that pill.
It's crazy, man. So she got through that like a trooper, but then we were home for like 24 hours. I was home. I was like, all right, project time. Okay, I guess like the boat's been sitting out front. I've been working on it. It's hot out now. Like I'm gonna wrap this thing up. We're gonna get it in the water today. Boat day. Everyone's back. We're feeling good. She's like ready to be out. We get on the boat, we go have some fun. We get home and she's like, I don't feel good. And we like, routine check of vitals and stuff. She's got a fever. And it's like, that's not good, because if she has a fever, we have to go to the hospital. We have to go to the emergency room because the chemotherapies and all this she's been through, she doesn't have much of an immune system. So because she can't fight off an infection or anything on her own, we have to get to the hospital and use drugs, antibiotics and whatever, or figure out what's going on, diagnose it initially. figure out if we need to treat it or not, or what's going on. So, we get to the hospital at like midnight, 1 a.m. maybe that night, after being out on the boat all day in the sun, had a few drinks, and you like eat dinner.
Timing.
You're like eating dinner. You're like, God, I can't wait to get in bed after I eat, I'm like just tired. And it's like, oh shit, we're going to the emergency room 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Off to Charleston. So we get there again. It's like 1 a.m. by the time we actually got there. Cause at that point I was like, all right, well, we don't need to rush out the door. Like, let me pack my stuff. I'm going to be here for several days. Like we'll just, everyone good. Got to put the other kids to bed. It's like, okay, we'll hit the road, call you when we get there and let you know what's going on. Jeez. So, she ended up having a respiratory virus and a small infection around this G-tube thing, which you can't see when their platelets are so low. And because you don't get that redness and that discoloration of a infection.
Because the body's not necessarily fighting it, right?
Well, her body's trying to fight it, I think, which is the fever, but it can't present because there's no discoloration because of the different blood work, right? I don't remember if it's the platelets or it's the hemoglobin or the white blood cell. At any rate, her blood work's all jacked up. It doesn't present. So they're like, she may have some, it looks tight. Like that's all. They're like, it looks tight. I'm like, great. Okay. Yeah. Well, whatever. Cool. So they're giving her an antibiotic for skin stuff. They're giving her an antibiotic for this respiratory virus. And then she became constipated and wasn't going to. So we were in a fever, put us back in the hospital for a week.
Oh my gosh.
7 days. And after we had already been there for 9 days for the surgery, we were home for like not even 24 hours. It was like back for a week. And that's the thing we got to be careful of when it's like, oh, let's have all these friends and do this and do that. It's like, and of course we let her, and we're very careful and cautious about what we do with her because we have to be careful. She has no immune system and any little thing sends us all to the hospital for a week. And it sucks. It sucks. Yeah. And it's like, dang. And speaking of immunocompromised too, I think that's one thing that changed my perspective too, is there's been cases right after chemo where, we would have her wearing a mask, and in some cases, knowing we were going in, and depending on what I might have been doing, like I would wear a mask because I didn't want to get sick and give it to her, and then end up in the hospital for even longer periods of time. Because if she gets sick and like a respiratory virus or something, she's in isolation at the hospital for 3 weeks. She can't do it. She can't see the dog. She can't go to the playroom. She can't go out. She can't go to the cafeteria. Like, they keep her isolated for 3 weeks. Wow. So it's like, it's not fair to her for me to be out and get reckless and give her something. And then she's tied up for 3 weeks. Exactly. It made me change the way I saw other people in public wearing masks, where other people were like, oh, you blah, blah, blah. You're so scared of COVID. It's like, it's not about COVID. Right. It's about not having my child in isolation for 3 weeks in a hospital. Right. So it changed my perspective. And I did the same thing. I'm like, look at this idiot driving in their car with their mask on, but it's like, you don't know what that person has going on. Exactly. So just mind your own business. Right. It ain't about you. Yep. Like, let them do them. You worry about yourself. Yep. And that's how I go about the world these days. There's more
to the picture than we
always
know.
You're quick to judge things like that. So anyways, that was a surgery situation. We're back in the hospital. We just got back from a series of tests to make sure she's healthy enough to do the next series of this treatment, which now we don't know if we can do. And I'll tell you why in just a second. She did a hearing test. Her hearing is really good. Some of the chemo's drugs that she's had to take are known to cause hearing loss. So they were preparing us to saying, hey, like, she's likely going to have hearing aids like through high school. Wow. I was like, damn. Well, then because we've put stuff out there, and our community is like giving back to us by connecting us with this or information about that. Sure. And, other parents reaching out, and Brandy ends up finding some piece of information about a new drug that is like a blocker for the hearing problem. And it was like just recently FDA approved, and it was not something that they were going to do. And Brandy brings it up like, hey, how about this sodium thiosulfate that's supposed to prevent the hearing loss? And they were like, let's look into it. They're like, hey, yeah, let's give it a try. Let's see what's up. Like there's like, if we use it and it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. There's no other negative side effect of doing it. So we're like, let's give it a go. Her hearing's right. I'm convinced she can hear more things than she could now before. Like we'll be driving and she's like, what is that noise? I'm like,
Right.
you can hear that?
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, we're good. So anyways, she does have hearing loss in extremely high frequencies, like outside of our normal range of hearing, like dog whistle, high frequency kind of thing. It's like, sometimes I wish I had high frequency hearing loss. Yes. I don't want to hear that thing, making noise in the background of whatever. So that was good. She had heart tests because they continue to monitor her heart because there is known complications and they just want to make sure that she's not having negative impacts to her heart with all these drugs too. So they do heart tests, kidney tests. She has one kidney now, so we got to be very cautious with the one she has left. So they do those types of tests, EKGs and all kinds of stuff. She's there today getting another test. I can't remember what it is. And then obviously the other scans for cancers, does she still have cancer? Is there active cancer? What's going on? Well, the most recent scan came back still showing some cancer at the tumor bed, which we were surprised to hear because the surgeon was like, he took his time. He was in there forever. And he came out and he sat down and he's like, that was hard. I was like, oh, geez. He's like, but I got like 97, 98%. Like I got it all out of there. He's like, anything that's left is dead stuff that was too high risk to try to remove because there was a lot of stuff on main arteries and things that was like,
not worth it.
We'll use chemicals to kill off the rest of that if we have to, and radiation. And that's what all these other treatments are for after the fact is kill off anything else that could potentially still be there.
Yep.
So we get the scans back and they're like, hey, it's still highlighting and showing that there's some cancer, but we're going to proceed with this treatment and blah, blah, blah. It's like, dang, okay. We'll just proceed with the stem cell transplant. I'll explain the stem cell transplant in a second. Well, it just so happens that, one of our oncologists, one of our doctors there is a specialist in this cancer. There's very few of these people in the country in the world that specialize in neuroblastoma, but we happen to have one of them.
Perfect.
And she's awesome. She is
what's her name?
Dr. Krivecka. Yeah, she's awesome. She's at a conference in Amsterdam, the World Neuroblastoma Conference, at the same time that we find out there's still some cancer left. And they're like saying, oh, we're going to proceed. She calls. She gets this information about Kendall. She calls and they're kind of reviewing her stuff. And she's like, hey, I just got information here at the conference that we should not proceed with that yet and do 2 rounds of immunotherapy first. Well, first, we need to do a PET scan and find out if it's dead cancer cells, benign, whatever, or if it's live, active, dividing cancer cells.
Both would show up the same?
In the initial MIBG scan, which is a neuroblastoma specific scan, it shows up no matter what. But it doesn't say if it's live or dead, essentially. The PET scan will show if it's active or not.
Okay.
So she's doing that today. So we probably won't know the results till tomorrow.
Right.
So it's kind of like, okay, now we don't know if we're proceeding with this plan or that plan. And it's hard for us to plan for anything these days. It's because it all changes so quickly. And it's like, you can't get too set on any one thing. So it's like, we can really only plan about 2 days in advance with her right now, which is frustrating because you want to make all these plans and book things and do da-da-da-da.
Especially summer coming up, right?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
So the stem cell transplant is what most people know as a bone marrow transplant. And it's a very big, high risk treatment. They use ultra high doses of chemotherapy to kill off anything in her body.
The whole body.
Specifically to kill off like your entire immune system. I mean, it just kills it off. And to the edge of death. Like it's a very high risk thing. They put her in these isolation rooms that are pressurized and all this kind of, and it's interesting about the rooms too. They're under a positive pressure. So it's all constantly pushing stuff out the door so that if you open the door, it's pushing anything out.
Right.
Anybody walking in, whatever, anything that's airborne is pushing out of the room.
Yep.
On the other side of that, if you have a virus like the respiratory virus and she has to be isolated in these negative pressure rooms, so that if somebody opens the door, it's not pushing her virus out of the room. It's sucking it into a vacuum system, and it's a negative pressure. So it could pull other stuff into the room, but at least her virus isn't exiting the room. It's a negative pressure. It's interesting, right?
That is so fascinating.
It's crazy when I was like, what? It's so cool.
I think I've only seen that like at the butterfly museum where it's like,
yeah.
they don't want the butterflies to get out.
Yeah. So anyways, they use ultra high doses of chemotherapy to kill off her entire immune system and like to the edge of death. And I say that like to try to bring context to like how extreme it is.
Yeah. That's not a minor thing.
No.
Right.
A bone marrow transplant, which they do in like leukemia and things like that, you get a donor. You get someone else who's a perfect match, and they are a donor for bone marrow, and you get someone else's bone marrow. And that's higher risk because you have the potential for your body to reject it.
Yeah.
And then that's not a good, things are bad.
Right.
I don't know how they deal with that. I know it's not good. Like,
sure.
Very bad situation. Yeah. She's having a stem cell transplant, which is the exact same process, but she gets to use her own stem cells to reinfuse into her and build her back up. So the risk of rejection isn't there,
right?
Which is it's a little safer. We did a stem cell collection after two or three rounds of chemo. They did a stem cell collection, which is a crazy process. I've got a whole video on it if you guys want to go check that out. It's on the Brodie Bunch channel. But they put this big line catheter in her neck into like a big main artery, and it's got two lines, an in and an out. And her blood goes out of her neck into a machine, into a centrifuge, and it spins the blood inside of it, and it separates into the 3 layers of blood. You've got your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and the platelets, like the 3 different layers. And then it skims off the middle layer, which is your stem cells. It skims it out of the middle and collects it into like an IV bag. It's mind-blowing. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Gosh.
And they collected like 10 million stem cells, which is like 10 ounces of fluid. It's like hardly, I was like, that's it?
That's it?
We're done?
Yeah.
Okay. They had to do it over 2 days because they can only do it for like 3 or 4 hours at a time. So they collected about 5 million one day and then 5 million again the next day. So we were there for like, I think total we were there for like 3 days. It was painless. Like she just sits there. She just can't be super active and do anything, but she, watch her iPad and build Legos or do whatever for 4 hours. And it's wild. It's insane modern medicine. And a lot of people look down on modern medicine and, big pharma and all this stuff. And it's a different side of modern medicine. Absolutely. Like this stuff is crazy, life-saving stuff, but the technology and what people have figured out is unreal. Yeah. So anyways, she does the stem cell collection a while back. They freeze them. They can be frozen indefinitely. They only plan to use about half of those to do her stem cell transplant. So she'll have another 5 million frozen that she could use again if we had to do it a second time. Anytime, indefinitely.
Wow.
They freeze it for free for like 5 years or something, and then it's like $10 or $20. It's a low fee that we pay.
It's the cheapest storage you're gonna find.
Yeah. It's like a year. It's like $30 a year, or maybe it's even $100 a year. I don't know, but
still.
Yep, I'll pay for it.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
So ultra high doses of chemotherapy, they kill things off, they'll reinfuse her stem cells, and then that will start to build her immune system back from scratch. So the day that she gets her stem cells back, they say that's your second birthday. And then it'll take, we're there for about 6 weeks while her immune system starts to build back up. She's very closely monitored by very specialized people that are very familiar with the process and know what to look for and that sort of thing. And then after that, she'll be in a good way that she can leave. And then she'll be sort of rebuilding her immune system from scratch, hopefully with no cancer left. And then she has to do several rounds of immunotherapy, which is like a whole nother thing. It's a very painful treatment. This treatment won't be painful. The stem cell transplant won't be painful, but she'll be sick from the chemo. It's like she'll be nauseous, throwing up, diarrhea, just feeling like crap, sleeping a lot. Immunotherapy, is painful. Like it's like a constant morphine drip while they do it. And it's like this, I might be confusing this with something called, I think DFMO is what they call it, but it's a chemical that attaches itself to the fat cell in your blood.
Okay.
And like attacks it. And it causes a lot of like nerve pain and stuff. I might be doing a really bad job of explaining that because I can only research ahead so much into like what we're getting ourselves into. So like I've heard about it, I've researched it a little bit, but I'm like, okay, that's like
you can't
months and months down the road. Like I need to focus on what we're about to do.
Exactly.
And as we get into that phase, then I'll start really looking into the next because it's just like, it's just too much. Yeah. And that's how I've treated a lot of this. It's like, okay, I want to know the broad spectrum.
Right.
I don't need to dive super deep into all of them. Like, give me the big picture. This is what we're doing now. Okay, I'm going to dive deep into this. I'm going to be an expert in it. I want to know every single little detail and thing about it. And as we kind of get into that and I know it, I'm going to start looking at the next one. Okay, what's coming up after that? Expert. Yeah. What's coming up after that? So it's like I have a high level understanding of what's happening, and then I dive deep into it as we get there.
Smart.
Maybe. So we'll find out today if she still has active cancer or not, or tomorrow, I suppose. And then what the rest of the treatments look like. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at with Kendall. But she's
thanks for the update, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
Lots of people giving positive thoughts and prayers, and I think it's the hardest thing for, I would assume, anybody is a child dealing with this.
It is. It's tough, and some of the thoughts that go through your head are, why her, and those sort of things. And you're like, kids don't deserve it. And it's like, I talked to a pediatrician friend of mine whose son actually died from this same cancer.
Oh, wow.
Which is awful. But he's like, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up trying to figure out why, because it's bad luck. Like, focus on what you can control. And don't beat yourself up about why it's her or why it happened, or did you do something wrong, or like you didn't. It's bad luck.
Yeah.
I'm like,
because that's living in the past, right? That's living in something that we have zero control. And so what you've done is you say, what can I control right now? And that's just taking care of her, updating myself, and learning what it is that's going on right now. Because you're also trying to prevent yourself from thinking into the future, right? Which is the fear of the unknowns, right? The future creates anxiety and stress and worry. The past creates guilt and shame and regret. And so if we can't stop our brain from time traveling by just being present, whether that's, through being in a podcast today, just so you don't have something to think about tomorrow, right? But it's, it could be meditation. It could be learning a new instrument. It could be just gratitude and grounding. Using your senses. What do I smell? What do I hear? What could I taste right now to just get me present? So I think you're handling it very well, man. I mean, I'm, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
You're allowing yourself to be vulnerable. You're allowing yourself to be, a dad who's present, who's communicating, and you're, trying to use this to make sense of how can you help other people through what you're experiencing, what you're learning. Cause I mean, if it's 700 people, what, a year you said?
With this cancer, yeah, what the data says.
What is that, drip in a bucket? Like, that's nothing in comparison to our population. So sounds like it's something that definitely needs the word spread about. And, just awesome that y'all have got the blessing of these experts coming into your life, right, at the right time, being in this area, having a job that you've got flexibility, that you can work in a hospital.
I said this in the last podcast when I talked about Kendall. And it was the craziest thing. I'd be curious to hear your take on it. There's a point where when I realized the full scope of things and we had all the information and I knew that we could handle it, I said, thank God it's us. And it was like, are you an idiot? What do you mean, thank God your kid has cancer? It's like, well, it's just like you're in this situation that if someone, like, I say that because I know we can handle it. I think is really, it's like, I know that we're strong enough. I know Kendall's strong enough. She was built for this. Like the way she's handled this, even things leading up to this, it's like, she is fully capable of handling this. Just her personality traits, the way, like everything about her, like she can handle it. I can handle it. Brandy can handle it. Together, we're going to handle it. Cameron, the sister, can handle it. Hannah, the baby, she doesn't know any better. She's just yelling and screaming, throwing food at us. And you're like, all right. But, yeah, thank God it's us, because I know we're going to get through it and we're going to be just fine. And it's not some other family that took this spot in line that couldn't handle it. And it's almost, and maybe I shouldn't count my chickens before the eggs hatch, but it's almost like survivor's guilt, maybe. It's like, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but I've felt almost at some point, because I've heard really bad stories and I've talked to other parents, and it's like, man, I'm glad it was us. We're going to get through it.
Right.
It's interesting.
I think it's powerful for you even to muster those words.
It is. It's a weird, strange thing to feel and say and articulate and say out loud, especially this publicly.
Right.
It's weird.
But it's a beautiful perspective, right? Because nobody wants that to happen to them.
No.
But to be able to take that step back and say, okay, whether it's financially or, job wise and flexibility or the positive attitude of the rest of the family or the support system that you have in the community or within.
And I wonder if part of that too is knowing that we have an audience to share information that might save other kids.
Right.
Like is maybe also part of that feeling of like, man, thankfully, like we might save more kids than just Kendall because of what we have.
Yeah.
So
go feel your stomachs of the child that's in the next room, right?
Yeah.
But it's tough. And I think there's an aspect of like, we don't want to create more fear in parents because there's enough to be scared of already. But
there's a parent out there looking for information that doesn't know what's going on or what's happening, or they might learn something that's, who knows, but there's something, there's more to it than this is bigger than just Kendall. I feel like.
Well, I think it's great too. And I do want to highlight for a second that I think sometimes we trust doctors 100%, and that's not wrong. However, doctors are busy, right? And to keep up with the latest technology and the latest updates on every single thing is just not always going to be possible. And so for you and Brandy to go and say, hey, what about this thing for hearing?
That's exactly right. I didn't understand. I had a few people who reached out early on and they were like, checking on us and they're like, you got to be your own advocate. You got to be your own advocate. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right.
And then you start to learn like, oh, you got to like, you'll be doing some your own research and speaking up and like, what if we don't want to do that treatment? What if we want to do this? How about this drug? Hey, what about that? And then like, you really do have to be the squeaky wheel a little bit.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate enough to be like really get along with all of the doctors as well. And so that's helped. Like we have a great relationship.
Sure.
They know that we've been out talking with other doctors and they encourage the second opinions. They don't have these big egos. They're like, well, we're the best and we're going to, which is very helpful too. We're an incredible hospital with great doctors and an awesome system. So anyways.
Is that MUSC?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. They're pretty phenomenal.
They are. They are.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you being vulnerable.
Of course.
I respect the hell out of you as a fellow dad.
Thank you.
I'm here for you and your family. Anything, if anybody, any of your daughters or you and your wife need to get connected with somebody to talk and just have a space to just dump that's not public and out there, let me know.
All right. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, watching. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave ratings, reviews on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.